And before we take up any business, I just want to let anybody in the audience know if they're here for item F2, which is an enforcement item for the Division of Aquatic Resources. If you're here for F2, we're going to defer the matter.
Defer?
Yes.
Meaning,
Meaning that the matter will be taken up at a subsequent land board meeting.
okay,
Okay, so I didn't want you waiting around the whole day.
for F2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so hold on to your testimony
Okay,
for when it does get scheduled.
okay, sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? F2? Okay?
Okay.
So I hope you didn't come in from a neighbor island.
Oh, I came from Maui.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Video conferencing, they're gonna do that eventually, I think.
We are.
We're working on it.
Okay,
Pay
so-
for an airline trip, just have them tell you.
Yeah, I was told to appear in person to ask for the extension. That's what I came by.
Oh, okay. That's why we're deferring it. So-
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Okay, second reminder is to please speak up because the microphones are also supposed to carry to the camera that's outside, so that they can hear you. And with that, we will, board members, take up the approval of the June 27th, 2014 minutes. Anybody have any amendments to those minutes?
Any comment?
Okay.
So move to approve June 27th.
Okay, we have a second? Okay, Tommy seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. First move up agenda item, Ross? Department of Transportation?
Morning, Chair Ailana, board members. Ross Smith from the Department of Transportation Airports Division for items M1 through M15. Given the length of the list, I'm happy to answer any questions any of the board members may have on any of the submittals.
Okay. These are mostly revocable permits that continue on for leasing of spaces at a number of airports throughout the state.
That's correct.
Any board members have any questions regarding any of those agenda items, M1 through 15?
Move to accept the recommendation.
Are you gonna take public comments on that?
Yeah, so hang on a second. Are you in a comment?
Yeah, I want to.
Okay. Public comment on M1 through 15. Dan?
Yes, Dan Purcell, member of the public. I've commented on this before. While these may appear ministerial items, they are all important, and I'm hoping that all of the board members, including the new board members, are actually reviewing each of these. They are important. And again, I mentioned that if this is too much for this board, it's just too much work for them, then maybe they need to do something else. Also, you might consider a consent, kind of a consent calendar where you have items that you're planning to just consent on, so to speak. There are no opposition, you've received no testimony. Then people know it's on the consent calendar, and then you can handle it that way rather than listing it. But that's another way I've seen it done. But these are important items, and there's a lot of revenue and a lot of efficiencies or inefficiencies, and they don't, they're important. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on any of these agenda items, M1 through 15? Okay, seeing none.
Move to accept the recommendation of the staff on those
M1 through 15.
Second.
items.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members.
Aloha. Lloyd Maki, Department of Defense. Agenda item D3.
No, D16.
M16.
M16.
I'm sorry.
M16.
I'm sorry, looking at the one above. M16. Thank you for catching that.
Good morning, Chairman Aila, board members. My name is Lloyd Maki with the Department of Defense regarding item M16 to allow use by the Pacific Regional Medical Command telehealth service in our Houdini Armory. Do you have any questions?
Any questions regarding agenda item M16? Pretty straightforward. We've done it before.
Don't have any? No.
Anyone in the audience wishing to testify on agenda item M16? Seeing none, from all members.
Move to approve agenda number M16, as per recommendation.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? See none, motion carried.
Thank you very much.
D4.
D4, next agenda item, D4.
Morning, Chair, Board members, Kevin Moore, Land Division. D4 is a request by the City and County of Honolulu for a direct lease of about a little under 5 acres of lands at Sand Island. And the city wants to use this site for a temporary mobile access to services and housing facility. It's kind of a homeless transition facility.
I might ask you to speak. I apologize to use the microphone. I'm sorry.
Okay, just speak up a little bit louder.
We are recommending Chapter 343 HRS exemption for this project because there are no planned permanent facilities or structures. I believe there are representatives here from the city who are going to give a more of a visual description of the project, but the staff recommendation is to go ahead and issue the direct lease and an immediate right of entry for this purpose.
Do you have any questions for our staff before we bring up county staff?
Maybe our staff could sit by because we probably will when we get the rest of the information.
Sure.
Sure.
You need it on the chair?
No, I'll step out of the way. Thank you. One Chair Isla, board members, thank you very much for your time and consideration for this measure. The city is proposing this housing, I'm sorry, Ed Sniffen with the City and County of Honolulu. Here with me are Peter Hirai, Deputy Director of Emergency Management, and Jun Yang, our Executive Director for our Housing Department.
Thank you.
We're here with an initiative that we'd like to use the Sand Island property for. It's our Housing First Transitional Center. It's a center that we're looking at as a transitional site, a temporary site, to bring in our services so we can look at trying to support the homeless population now. We have our Housing First program. We're moving it forward. We have our RFP that we're going to be selecting in October. We have our affordable housing strategy that we're moving forward as well to help address the affordable housing that's available at this time. But we see that we have to do something now. The city wants to do something right now. So this is why we're proposing this center. I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to start the presentation, and June is going to assist him in that.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Isla, members of the board. Again, my name is Peter Hirai. I'm the Deputy Director for the Department of Emergency Management, City and County of Honolulu. We're going to run through this slideshow. No, that's fine, that's fine. Yeah, we're good. Thank you. And I did provide a copy for each of you.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
This is a general location of the center. You all know where the TMK is, it's listed. It is right across the bridge. And it's marked by the yellow trapezoid. This is a little bit of detail showing the general layout, proposed layout. This is just a conceptual layout. Please note that nothing is firm at this time. And also we'd like you to note that there is a guard shack at the entrance, and the guard shack is at the entrance of the road. This guard shack is meant to increase our security presence there. Next slide. And Ed briefly went over the purpose of the center. And bottom line is this is a triage site. This is a triage for transition to the Housing First program. This is supposed to provide someone a safe, stable, and supportive environment in which they can receive assessments and services and or referral to us to appropriate programs and housing. Next slide, please. This is going to be temporary in nature. We do not want to convey any kind of permanence to anybody who stays there. So it's going to be essentially porta potties, shower trailers, canopies for shade for their comfort, some cooling fans also for comfort, but no permanent structures are going to be put in. We are going to put in water and electricity and minimal lighting, but again, that's just for comfort and life safety. And it's not meant for any kind of permanence. Okay, next slide, please. We do have a grading permit with the city that's prepared. I did prepare the application for that, and we're looking at grading less than 1 acre of the site. After that, we're going to lay down recycled asphalt product, also known as RAP. And we are not going to do any kind of trenching, and we're not going to have any sewer lines. We will make the contractor who's servicing the porta potties and the showers take it out, suck it out, and carry it away from the site. Okay, next slide. Oops, sorry.
So this program is to service our Housing First initiative that we have in the city. So everything here that we're doing is voluntary by nature. It is a voluntary access to our Housing First resources. There are some basic rules. Those who've been convicted of a violent crime in the past 2 years will not be allowed to continue to stay on the site. These are just based on some of the federal guidelines of some of our federal programs. The other main restriction is going to be the persons will have to have legal status on our state. The focus is for our most vulnerable population because our Housing First is to service our chronically homeless individuals who are on the street. It doesn't mean that if somebody comes in, they will not be able to have access and referrals to other programs. It's that this site is to service those who are going to be working and coming into our Housing First program. For the house rules, it's one basic premise. We want to encourage our clients, our residents of this site to respect the privacy, property, and safety of others. That is the basics of our house rules. Now, once the clients are able to come into the site, they will have access to our Hale Omolama assessment. That's the basis of what we're doing with our Housing First. The assessment is the tool, it's the standardized tool for the entire community, for the entire island to know what are the appropriate resources for this population, for our homeless individuals. So this assessment will allow us to know, is Housing First the appropriate housing intervention for this population, for this person? The second step is, if it is not, then what are the right resources and how do we then refer them to those right resources? Case management is an integral part of what Housing First is. So we will have case management to allow that these individuals will be successful and successfully housed into our Housing First. And we know that pets are a part of our community, our homeless community, so we want to allow for access at this site for pet-friendly areas. Oh, and this site will be 24 hours, so if individuals are coming into the site, we will not close the gate on them. There will be no gates to close.
Where do they sleep?
They'll be sleeping on the site in structures that they may bring on, like tents. So we're not building any permanent structures or facilities for sleeping.
What if they don't have tents?
Then the service providers that will be working as our partners on the site, they will provide some of those services to them as well. That will be expected. The transportation to the site will be provided as a part of this program. They will have morning and evening access to the site, and there is the emergency shelter system, if you do not know, is a nighttime shelter, meaning that during the day, clients are encouraged to leave the shelter for employment or other programs, be it school, educational, whatever it might be. This is a site that does not do that. This is a site that will allow for residents for the homeless clients to stay on site, and access to services will be provided to them 24 hours. There will be basic trash disposal services, and as Peter has mentioned, we will have hygiene centers, showers, bathroom facilities. And for other basic needs, we're going to be working with our community organizations, community partners, for basic needs such as for food, for hygiene supplies, these type of things as well. Go back to Peter.
Ladies and gentlemen, bottom line is we want to continue to do our due diligence. And to do that, we do respectfully ask for the approval today so we can have a right of entry into the place and we can continue our site preparation and, again, our due diligence. We want to reach out to everybody. We already did so very successfully at Mahalo Elementary School the other evening. We received great feedback from everyone. All sectors of the community provided us feedback. And we want to begin operations only after we receive the community feedback and perform our due diligence. We're looking at the next 2 to 3 months. We're looking at operating the site at capacity for 1 year while we stand up the Housing First program and reassess at the end of that 1 year. We would then transition it out of operation and hopefully have it completely shut down within 2 years and return the land back. And at this time, we welcome any questions.
Oh, sorry. Before we open to questions, just wanted to finish up. Apologize. As Peter had pointed out, because we don't have right of entry to the site yet, we're very, very early in our due diligence process. We just pretty much started our paperwork and our conceptual planning of the programming for the site. So that's why we have a diagram that just kind of shows conceptually what services we believe we're going to be providing on site. All of that's going to be vetted throughout our due diligence, our reviews with the potential providers that we're going to be speaking with that respond to our RFQ. And it's going to be vetted through all the community comments that we received on our Wednesday night meeting. We received some very good ones. The general comments that we were looking at were a concern that the city was not ready to move forward yet. And they're right, because we're still early in the due diligence process. We're still talking story with everybody. We're still communicating with the neighboring communities. We're still talking to the service providers and reaching out to the homeless community. For the site itself, there were concerns about it being hot and arid, isolated, which is why we're looking at our programming pieces to address that. There are also concerns about the site having potential hazardous materials on it, which is why we're coordinating with DOH here side to make sure we address those concerns as we move forward. So, like I said, we're very early on in our due diligence process. We want to make sure that we're addressing these things. We've committed to the community to go back for one more meeting, at least, with them. But throughout, we've committed to touching bases with a lot of community members, the stakeholders, the neighboring maritime community, the neighboring businesses, the residential community further up near Kalihi side, and the service providers and the homeless community. So we're still moving forward on all of these things. We just want to make sure that we get the right of entry so we can start the site assessments and move forward from that respect. So with that, thank you very much.
Okay, so with that, I'll open it to questions from the board.
I have a question.
Jimmy?
On your wrap that you're going to lay down, is it on the entire area?
No, sorry.
Yeah, because of our proposed grading permit, we're limited to 1 acre, less than 1 acre on the grading permit.
Okay. And this wrap will be used primarily for what? Not the tents. You're not going to put the tents on the wrap, or?
We're going to put the canopy on the wrap, and the concept is to have either some kind of padding or some kind of air mattress to mitigate that for the folks that sleep on it. Again, yeah, the key is not to connote any kind of permanence to them. We didn't want any kind of tent cities or any other structures there, definitely.
Okay. And with that being said, In the event that, will there be security?
Correct, there will be 24/7
24-hour
security.
security,
Yes,
okay.
yes, sir.
And when you say pet-friendly areas, is there a defined area where the homeless will go with their pets, or they commingle around the whole?
That'll be vetted through the due diligence process. When we're talking to the provider that's going to be providing the services,
Yeah.
really they're going to be bringing a team of providers to help us with this site. The layouts will be set from that. Whether we set up separate areas for the pet-friendly areas, or we set up areas for the pets and families separate, we don't know yet.
Okay.
We're still trying to set that
Okay.
up.
Then my last question is, for your 1 year possibly for this temporary shelter, your 1 year will start after you've done all your due diligence and once everything's started, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now question, talking about the criminal background, within 2 years, who is going to determine, who is going to go out there, identify these people? Is there somebody, like DHS, someone going to be there that going to evaluate these people, do a background check on them? Or
So
how
through-
are you going to do it?
So as people are coming in, the intake process will include, the assessments will be a part of that intake process. Our service providers, going into shelters many times is just a part of that process. It's not to eliminate these clients from the shelter or from, in essence, but for this site as well. Just to have some kind of criminal history will not disqualify you from the site, nor will it disqualify you from resources. It is just to make sure that the other clients that are at the site are going to be safe. So we want to make sure that everybody who's on site will have the safety there. So as a precaution, just to find out, does this individual have criminal history that is less than 24 months, then we will ask that person that you will not be able to find services at this site, and we'll do our best to try to find any appropriate services for that person.
Like you said, this facility is going to be open 24 hours now. You said you're going to get a security guard going to be over there checking IDs, checking their background at that point that they arrive? Or?
The security is not going to be doing the criminal background history check. It's going to be the service providers, and there will be somebody on site 24 hours. Yes.
How many people are contemplated to be housed in this compact?
We're looking at a maximum capacity of 100, but what we see is that people will probably be flowing in and out. So it'll be kind of ebb and flow as we refer them to other programs, or possibly as we keep them for the Housing First program eventually. So, but we're looking at a maximum capacity of 100.
Am I to understand from what you're saying that the city will not be operating it, it will be provided to service providers?
That's correct.
So for instance, who might be, are there any potential?
Well, we're going through an RFP process, so that will have to go through our normal competitive bid process. But it would be groups like an IHS or Waikiki Health or US Vets or Waianae Community Outreach type of organization who have been working in the homeless services community for many years. They have an understanding of the model. They have been working with Hale Omalama with the assessments. They've been working with our city agencies, the state agencies, and understand the programs very well.
Are you asking at this time for the board to approve both the right of entry as well as authorization for a lease?
Yes, that was the request.
Chris?
You mentioned families. Can you tell me like what are the criteria? You mentioned something about the criteria for people that would be ideal to be served here and others. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Real quick before I ask June to come up and speak to it. As Peter mentioned in the presentation, this site is meant to be a transition site. So nobody will be turned away from coming to the site to get the intake services, the assessment services, the case management services there. Then when we look at the assessments, we'll be referring the clients there to appropriate programs that fit them. The criteria that June had laid out previously was for Housing First specifically. And for those that are most vulnerable in the community, in some cases, they don't fit in other programs. So we would then look at them staying at this facility.
So we currently have housing resources for families, for many of our homeless populations. So as we are able to intake and assess these families and different clients, we'll be able to refer them to those appropriate resources. As Ed had mentioned, we are focusing our efforts here to bring the clients for housing first. But those who are families that, as they're waiting to get into the resources, we're not going to push them out to other places.
So June had provided for you Housing First kind of 101 to talk about the program itself. In that program, we're looking at trying to get 100 units available for Housing First clients by end of fiscal year. In this year, as we move forward, we're hoping to get 20 online by the end of this year. So during the intake process, if people come in and they're assessed and qualified for Housing First, once the units come available, we'll be able to refer them into and provide the permanent supportive housing that we have available. That's the intent.
I have a question. All along the Sand Island area, all the way to the entrance to Honolulu Harbor, there is various surfing spots. Is there one in front of this area or not?
I'm not sure. I know in front of this area we have the BMX site. There's the canoe halau that use the facility near the boat ramp. At the end of the site.
Where are they on this picture?
Let me show you real quick.
Can you bring up the?
Yeah, it's up.
No, for the TV screen. Right there. One more. There you go.
So you can see the BMX site there.
Where is that?
Well, I'll stand up.
Just Makaya, the yellow.
So right here, this is the HCC Maritime Educational Training Facility. Right here, the entrance into Sand Island through the bridge. This is the BMX site that we're referring to at this point. The canoe halaus meet here, and we have a small boat ramp right here. This is, and there the island would be. The island would be right here.
So I guess my question is there going to be a, I will just say, a relationship between all the paddlers and whoever and this facility? Have you folks had discussion about whether or not there's going to be hostility or troubles brewing between these different groups? Because homeless people, they may wander down there, they may go inside the canoes, whatever, right? This is a 24-hour facility, and paddlers, the canoes cost, depending on what model it is, a lot of money. So what's the situation with that? You folks explored that?
We've started the discussions with them. As I said, we're very early on in our due diligence. Everyone in the community has addressed some concerns for this site, whether it be security from the maritime community, whether it be transportation safety along the route. If there are more people walking the route, there's potentials for property in that area that people have been bringing up as concerns.
You're going to have a security person physically present in that area?
We will have a security person.
So that if homeless guys try to take apart the boats and go sell the pieces, there's going to be a security guy there to stop it?
No. Our security will be at the guard shack and roving the site itself. The number one purpose for that is to keep the residents in the facility safe.
Okay, well, you folks are still in your due diligence period. It would be prudent to reach out to the paddlers clubs and whatever in that area, because the last thing we want is to get a big row going between the homeless program and the paddlers over there, who've probably been there for many years, and they have very expensive equipment. I don't know if they have a one-man halau there. Maybe they have a one-man halau. Easy for break-in one-man halaus. You just cut the lock, you take the boats out, you go sell them or whatever. I don't know. Maybe somebody here is going to address that, but that's just a concern I would have.
Absolutely.
So the security that they're gonna have for their facility is right off of Sand Island Access Road. It's the only way in or out. So
Okay.
if there's any unauthorized or non-owners leaving the property, any of the property, with something that they don't own, that security will be there to witness that. It's only one way in and one way out.
Can I follow?
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't really get a picture in my mind of what the population of this is intended to be. I mean, when you look at homelessness in Oahu, neighbor islands as well, but particularly in Honolulu, there's a population of people sleeping on cardboard, on the sidewalk, and then you have encampments. Typically, the former group looks to me single, mostly male. The encampment group is a mix, but may have children as well. Is this site, can you generalize as to what population the site is meant to house?
So as we've been doing our assessments across the island, we've come to realize that most of the chronically homeless are individuals. We do have some chronically homeless families, but they are mostly individuals. And we have to remember that this site is purely voluntary. So as individuals are encouraged, they can come out to the site and have access to these resources. It will most likely, for those who are chronically homeless, be individuals. But there are going to be those who are families as well that we will be able to access, services.
But the site is meant to be primarily house individuals.
This site will be open to individuals and families.
Okay.
Not necessarily, so Chris, if I could jump in, not necessarily to house, but to transition.
Oh, that's right.
Transition, absolutely.
But okay, will families be housed there? Families with children?
They will have access, so yes, they will have space, it will be available to them.
We're planning for anybody who qualifies for the Housing First program to be sheltered there until the units come available. So there could be individuals, there could be families there. And we're looking at the program to ensure that we support both.
Besides the security, there will be an on-site manager who's basically the boss?
That's correct. So there'll be there'll be a site manager 24/7 and security 24/7.
Do you get your own spot? Say you move in and you have a tent, is that your spot then?
See, all of that has to be vetted in the program right now. I really don't know what it's going to look like yet until we start talking to the service providers.
We're also providing for lockers or some kind of cage or
I
box
can see
so
that's
they can keep their personal items.
Then you have your own locker,
Right.
you don't have to worry so much about
Your personal
stuff
belongings,
getting
right. Correct.
swiped. But you're just not sure whether, how the actual layout will be managed on a actual on-the-ground basis. Okay.
I have a question.
Jimmy?
Reading this manual here for Housing First, it says here on July 22nd, 2014, there was 4,712 homeless individuals across the island. And of that population, 1,633 were unsheltered homeless. And you go on, furthermore breakdown. So if you're only going to house 100, only for a transitional period, what do you think the area of where in Sand Island, what do you think the total area or population might be of homeless in that surrounding area that might have access to or not have access to? One question. The other question is, what would determine if you have an outcry from the public, not the homeless now, but the public saying, not in my backyard? What would say that you would move forward, but you already had an approval from us?
For the public the public outcry, not in my backyard, you can hear it at any site.
Sure.
For us, we looked at
25.
about 25 sites across the island to see where we could best fit this facility, this transitional temporary facility. And based on our assessments, this was the best place. I'm never going to commit to telling the public that there's not going to be any impacts to you. I cannot say that. I cannot control human nature, and this is a voluntary program, so I'm not going to control anybody that comes to the site. So part of the message to the neighboring communities, the maritime community, the businesses, the residences, are help us. We'll try and address any concerns that you might have, but there are going to be concerns that we cannot, and that's going to happen no matter what site we choose. The alternative would be to do nothing, and I don't know if I'm willing to do that yet. So I don't know how we can address that concern. I cannot make a commitment to say that if so many people come out against it, we're going to say no, we're not going to do it.
But see, but my other point is, if there's only room for 100 and you have over 1,500 in the general vicinity, I mean, and this is only a transition, we'll be there. Well, you might be able to stay here 2 weeks or a month, and you've got to go because somebody else is coming in or moving out. That's what I'd like to have some clarity.
So, as a part of the Hale o Malama effort, we've come to understand what the need is and what the population really is. So, that is a point-in-time count. It's a snapshot on January 22nd every year. How many homeless do we have on island? It is something that we do on an annual basis. So, for our chronically homeless population, we note in there is about 558. What we've done in the community is do assessments, do surveys for people who are both sheltered in emergency shelter and those who are on the street. We've gone through nearly 900 of these assessments from the urban Honolulu all the way down to the Waianae coast. And this is the area that we're looking at for our Housing First program, because our data tells us that these are the areas, the Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and the Waianae areas have the highest population of chronically homeless individuals and families. We want to be able to target our programs for these areas. And when we looked at who are the chronically homeless in this area, we are coming to find it's approximately 200 to 250 individuals that would be appropriate for Housing First.
Right.
Now, when we talk through the state, they have, through their DHS contract, a contract with U.S. vets doing Housing First in their program. The city will have approximately 100 units or 100 housing units for 100 clients for our Housing First program, which will come online in October. That makes 200. We have some federal resources that will be able to transition and help the rest of those that are not going to be serviced in our contracts. So we will be able to meet the need that we have found so far.
Great.
So through this site, we'll be able to help bring those people and get our program up and running faster.
Thank you for the clarity.
Further question? Seeing none, there are some people that have signed up. Starting at the top of the list, Catherine Zien.
Aloha, board members.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, it's 3 people. Yeah. I think there's going to be other testimony.
Sure,
But
definitely.
is there going to be a possibility that after we've heard other testimony, we might be able to avail ourselves and ask additional questions?
That's what we're doing.
So you'll be...
We're not leaving
along? Okay, thank you.
Aloha, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Catherine Jian. I'm a service provider. I'm with the Pacific Alliance to Stop Slavery. We serve human trafficking victims as well as houseless persons in threat of criminalization. There are several issues that are very alarming about this proposal that is very ill thought out and put together by people who have no experience constructing sites like this for the houseless. All other Housing First programs are predicated upon their permanence. By definition, a temporary Housing First transitional center is a contradiction in terms. We feel that existing services are already out there that do exactly what the Sand Island encampment is proposed to do. The reason why this encampment is being proposed is because of recent criminalization laws in Waikiki and possibly in other districts that have made it basically illegal for houseless persons to exist in public spaces after hours. They will essentially, in practice, be given only a few choices other than prison. Either you be arrested, right, which is the worst case scenario, or you choose shelter, which a lot of families can't choose shelter because they have families that are too big to fit, Also, some of the shelters have bed bugs and are very restrictive and demeaning in their practice. Or you go out to Sand Island. The actual accurate count of homelessness is much larger than the point-in-time count. If you go by those who have actually accessed services in 2013, the UH, Center on the Family, came out with a services report that clocked them at, or counted them at about 10,000 just on this island. So to give you a sense of the problem, it is an emergency problem. There are other alternatives. The alternative is fully implementing housing first, not a de facto internment camp like this is. Furthermore, the Department of Human Services, pursuant to Act 105 of 2012, came out with a report legislatively mandated to do studies on homeless temporary encampments. They found that it was too much of a liability for the state to suffer because they would not be able to ensure the safety of all the occupants, nor would they be able to ensure the rates of theft that would occur, or provide the adequate facilities for these people. Now, as you know, there are 2 designated security personnel to facilitate 100 people who qualify as chronically homeless. That can range anywhere from severe mental illness to drug addiction, or both. And yes, there are some families that don't suffer from any of those, that are chronically houseless. You want to put them all together in one facility with 2 security guards. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Not to mention your concerns about the surrounding community. There are already factional wars that are chomping at the bit between certain gangs that are also homeless, okay? This is a very diverse community, so I don't want you to think that all homeless people are violent. They're not. But there is a minority of gang members who are Samoan and Micronesian. You've already seen them in the press, and any service provider or anybody who has any experience whatsoever working with the houseless communities know that they don't get along. They're already chomping at the bit wanting to divvy up their territory within this encampment. The people who will suffer also are outside in the community, surrounding community. Not to mention, there's a significant risk of toxic poisoning that the city and the state would be liable for because the city has not done its due diligence, and it won't. Their proposal for solving the toxicity scare or the worries involve putting asphalt on some of the affected area, which, mind you, covers actually in close to 100 acres of the surrounding area, as well as the proposed encampment. It's not just at that TMK plot, okay? So these issues of toxicity are highlighted in this summary provided by the Department of Water Supply, which you can also access at the Department of Health. Furthermore, if you watched the news last night, there was a major petroleum spill of over 3,000 gallons of probably jet fuel that happened about a 7-minute walk from this encampment. Simply covering part of the area with asphalt is not only ill-advised, it's insulting. Why? Asphalt is petroleum-based. And it's very toxic, actually, if you are exposed to it for a long period of time. Try go live out on a tennis court. You'll start feeling dizzy and a little sick. You can actually smell the fumes, yeah, coming from it. Now, these people are expected to either sleep on this asphalt or bring their own tents with direct contact with the asphalt. Not to mention that asphalt generates heat. I went out there a couple of days ago, and it was 93 degrees out there. Now, they want to cut down the kiawe trees, which have major thorns on them, about 1 to 2 inches long, right? Because I complained about it at the community meeting, right? If they cut down all of the kiawe bushes, there's absolutely no shade, let alone thorny shade, for these people. Also another liability, on top of the toxicity. Furthermore, aside from the DH report, you have an Oahu general plan that, you know, we try to follow, right? This proposal goes against several points in the Oahu General Plan. Physical development, Policy 8, under Objective A, it says locate community facilities on sites that will be convenient to the people they are intended to serve. In no way is Sand Island convenient. I don't care how many people try to tell you from the city that services will be provided, be provided. Well, how are these kids going to go and get to school easily, come back easily, right? Be free to be able to go to get ice with their parents because that's what they use to refrigerate their food, which of course also the city is not providing food. It's isolated from any resources. Secondly, population, policy 3 under objective 3. Manage physical growth and development in the urban fringe area and rural areas so that A, an undesirable spreading of development is prohibited, and B, their population densities are consistent with the character and development and environmental qualities desired for such areas. So for those of you who ask questions about the actual count, right, this obviously does not support the actual count that needs these services. This is clearly just a place to put them, to forget about them, out of sight, out of mind. The actual thing that works is fully implementing housing first, period. These resources will take away from that purpose, these proposals. And lastly, transportation, well actually there's two more, transportation and utilities. Policy 7 under objective B, require the safe disposal of hazardous wastes. Well, you've already seen or heard me talk about the area's toxic concerns, also major liability there. And EA must be done prior to ever thinking about putting human beings there. Public safety, objective B, policy 2, require all developments in areas subject to floods and tsunamis to be located and constructed in a manner that will not create any health or safety hazard. This encampment does not protect anybody from the next hurricane threat. And I was responsible for doing a community effort to evacuate the houseless families from the Kaka'ako area. And mind you, the city wanted to do it 5 hours before the hurricane hit Hawaii and load them onto buses on their own at night when it was raining and windy. Having a facility that's right on the water like this, far away from any resources, far away from us to get to them in the first place, to mobilize them, which it took all day, is another liability, okay? And let me just lastly leave you with this. The State Health Department provided the Board of Water Supply, or a summary from the Board of Water Supply. The report confirmed that within this 86-acre area, which included the proposed homeless encampment, the presence of soil contamination, including arsenic, lead, antimony, nickel, acetophenone, benzoprene, which is in asphalt, Dlnr, and methylene chloride in excesses of screening action levels in samples from the site. Other contaminants include metals, heavy metals, semi-volatiles, pesticides, and PCBs. Just that alone warrants an environmental assessment because there's people that are going to be out there. Children. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'll let you go. Okay.
If there was some permanent housing available for the homeless, would you still say that there will be an issue with drugs and gangs and, for controls and severe mental disorders, even in a permanent housing?
Like in every community that
Right.
exists, yeah.
So the difference here, you're saying the transition, and I agree with you about the EA. I agree with you, wholeheartedly with a lot of the points that you presented. But it don't matter, I think, where you go, you will still have these issues that you brought up, whether it's permanent or it's just in a transition period, correct?
Yes, that's true, but the significant...
What options you could give us?
Really good question. Significant difference is the isolation of this area plus the environmental concerns, right? And the lack of the ability to actually enforce any sort of security for the inhabitants and the outlying areas. Those are the main differences. However, the alternatives, very simple. There are so many alternatives that other cities have done before us. Housing First just being one of them. The houseless people, they already have a home. It's called Hawaii'a. It's just they can't afford rent. Most of them actually work. A lot of them are families. The growing number of houseless persons are families with children at that. And they're already in encampments that they self-police on their own. And they're slowly being criminalized from any sort of public space, which they don't want to be on the sidewalk. Sure. Yeah, they don't want to be in Waikiki, but it's safer in populated areas. Where it's not safe is where there's less people and less passers-by. That makes that area very dangerous. Sand Island is a perfect example of where it's very dangerous, especially for single women and families with young children. You don't want to relegate them to some place where there's less people, okay? Now, the alternative would be to implement RVs, recreational vehicles, in tiny homes that are 220 square feet or less. You have your aesthetically pleasing little tiny home villages that are actually mobile. You can build little organic gardens so they can eat. They're already there anyway, and when time comes for development, you can move them. Thing is about these tiny homes is that since they're aesthetically pleasing and they have all the amenities, they feel empowered to take care of their own little home. Yeah, that's work. That's just one example, aside from Housing First.
Okay, so if you went with these small little RVs, where would you put it geographically, or a footprint would be a safe area for them other than Sand Island?
That's a great example of a great question. Now, the city says that they've exhaustively looked through 25 other sites. We've requested these. We don't know where these other sites were. We don't know how exactly exhaustive, what their definition of exhaustive was. We would like to know what these other 25 sites were. What were the criteria by which they were refused? There are other sites out there. See, it's legally only now to be able to put these RVs on private property, not on a public road. You just need to find one. Again, if you're thinking about temporary, this would be a perfect temporary solution where they don't lose any dignity. You can communicate with them how it's going to look, how it's going to be structured, where it's going to be. They feel empowered to take care of it. And you don't relegate them, force them into a place where they don't want to go in the first place.
But certainly, they're not going to be RV parks in Waikiki.
No, no. Of course, Waikiki wouldn't be one of the
sites.
sites.
That's what people want to be, in your statement earlier.
No, actually, they're going to be actually unable to be in Waikiki by law now, because the mayor is going to sign the criminalization law, Bill 42. So they won't be able to be there. They'll have to be somewhere else. But this Sand Island plan is not well thought out, put together by people who have no experience whatsoever in developing homeless encampments, let alone the bottom line is homeless encampments, temporary ones, only prolong homelessness. That's what the DHS report said, as well as creating a large liability for the city and state, large one.
Okay, so the other question that I wanted to ask you, my question first, is being familiar with that area, because I served as the acting harbor agent for the Cay Boat Harbor for a couple of years. There are already numerous homeless folks in the area, unsupervised, being in the very same area. So to me, it makes more sense to have some organization to deal with that particular situation. We've got homeless folks that are walking into the RV, not the RV, but the bike place. There already are significant numbers of homeless in and around Sand Island, in and around Kehi Lagoon, right up the street in Kalihi. So
there's not that many, no. The entire population is measured at about 180. Now, the number of homeless has not been adequately studied.
all you have to do is get in a boat and drive up Kalihi Stream.
I've been there. I've been there.
Well,
I've been there
too. So
there's
lots
a
of
handful
folks
of
that are there.
homeless in that area, in that plot. But
more
it's not
than-
like how it was before they installed the park when they kicked all the Kanakamali out there. It's not nowhere near that number.
My question basically was, it's already happening. Why wouldn't you want to bring some systematic control to the area?
Because the way it's being used, the way it's being structured, and the environmental concerns of that area.
The people are already being exposed to environment. They're in that area.
If you can provide a study that shows exactly how many houseless persons would qualify for this program, then maybe I can come back with you with an adequate response. But asking me at this point when there's no study done or no count out there in Sand Island is a little unfair.
So the status quo is okay.
Status quo is what?
The status quo of homeless people
Where you
being
find-
exposed to the very same things that you're bringing forward is okay with you.
It's not okay. It's not. I don't know why the state didn't do an environmental assessment before this proposal.
It's a city proposal, so
Right.
they're asking us for a right of entry to go and do
Yeah.
some studies.
And comparing Sand Island with the Waianae Boat Harbor is not fair either, because there's 300 or 400.
I wasn't comparing Sand Island to the Waianae Boat Harbor. I was comparing it to my knowledge of the area around Kehi Lagoon, Sand Island, and Kalihi.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want you to be very clear about that. I was not.
I am very clear. I think you might want to ask a resident of that area or a beachgoer, because they actually went to the community meeting. And yes, they said that there were some homeless, but not near the numbers that will be there because of this proposal. And just saying that, and they will be corralled from, especially the district of Waikiki.
My point being.
They won't be servicing
My point being, there's
necessarily.
very little control in the area now. The status quo, in my opinion, is not safe for anyone. And so here's an opportunity to try something. That was simply.
It's not safe with the homeless encampment. It still does not address the issues of the environmental concerns or the safety concerns for women and children.
Thank you. Stanley?
Why don't you stay here, please? And the gentleman with the purple shirt, can you come? Mr. Hirai, is that your name? Hirai?
Yes.
You related to Shadow?
I'm not. No, my father's from Japan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair, do you mind if I ask for people, as speakers, to speak up?
Sure.
It's not
can everyone
amplified in
speak
the
up?
room and you seem to be engaging between yourself, but
You
it's
got it.
not reaching.
Okay, please speak up, everyone. Stanley?
No matter where the homeless are, whether it's Sand Island or on the side of the road at Dlnr Boulevard, they're subject to all kind of contaminants and toxic substances. You're on the side of the road continually. One of the things I experienced when I used to run a marathon, I ran on the road in La Poihoi for 15 years. And after a year and a half, I lost my sense of smell. And it didn't come back to me for a whole year, and I was lucky it came back. Some people don't get it back. So wherever the homeless people are gonna be, we're gonna have issues. And probably all of our beaches in industrial areas, including Sand Island, you know, they're contaminated from I don't know what, but probably a lot of things. And that's an issue. So I think that we need to take a close look at what the contaminants are, what the levels are, because for openers, you're gonna get a right of entry. Are you gonna be creating a public nuisance, right? Right this minute, I'm involved in a lawsuit in the Kona industrial area where the homeless people in a certain area have been terrorizing the neighborhood, attacking people from various places because they have found places where they can stay overnight. And some of them are nice people, some of them have serious kinds of disorders, not necessarily been to court, but they got disorders. Some of them are psychotic. And if they utilize drugs at night and then they go in the neighborhood and they attack somebody, which is what we have in the case I'm involved in. They hit a guy over the head with a cow bone 6 times. So he has major brain damage. So there's a Hawaii case. You folks should familiarize yourself with Littleton versus State of Hawaii. And this is at 66 Hawaii 55, 1982 Supreme Court case. And it talks about creating and maintaining public nuisances in the state of Hawaii. And this is against the state and the county. I think it related to a beach incident. So it doesn't take much to create a public nuisance. So my first concern after hearing what I heard so far is, if you don't have security present around this facility 24/7, you're just going to have it down the road. I don't think it's going to work, and I'm not in favor of it. Sure. You want to have it. I wouldn't maybe object to a short-term thing, but you got to have adequate 24-hour security to make people safe in this area from sexual attacks or whatever, or just somebody's on drugs and they just start attacking other people nearby. That's a very real risk, no matter where they are. So I don't hear it in you folks' proposal from the city and county that you have planned right now that you're going to have appropriately trained security personnel on site 24/7, especially if this is going to be a transition area. You don't get to know all of the personalities until they're there for a while, and the people next to them start to irritate them, and then one of them goes off. When they go off, maybe they attack more than one person. So you need to have that in place if you're going to have this kind of a facility. What's your comment about that, Mr. Hirai?
Yeah, again, for the record, Peter Hirai. You know, we looked at and talked to several officers, and we looked at the past, I don't know if you remember the Ala Park tent city that was put up several administrations ago. And we definitely interviewed and spoke with some of the police officers that actually responded to that area. And the one comment they had for us was the lawlessness of that particular facility. And so to address that and to mitigate that, we decided that security would be a high priority for this area. Not just having a roving presence, but also the security guard outside, the roving presence inside, having that 24/7, and having the program manager on site 24/7.
May I? Here's one. Can you? I guess you can't bring up the PowerPoint again, but here's one security flaw in their preliminary draft of the site. If you look at the actual encampment slide, you will see the encampment slide. Is it there? Oh, they have it. Anyway, if you remember the encampment slide, the males' quarters are actually positioned between the showers and where they're going to keep the families and children. So the women and children will have to actually walk past where the men are to get to the showers. That's not prudent.
Yeah, this is just a conceptual sketch.
This is an example of
That's why it says conceptual.
what we've had to deal with for a long time now, with this too quick proposal put together by people who have no qualifications.
Gotta try though.
Gotta try, yes, absolutely,
yeah.
but why don't we use models that have worked in other cities? Why don't we listen to the DHS and their report about what the liabilities are? Thank you.
for bringing that up. Any other questions?
No. I'd like to hear other questions.
Okay, so
I have one more question.
Sure.
Is the city and county planning to hold the state harmless as the owner of the premises? You folks are going to have a right of entry. Either you're going to be a lessee, or you're going to have a permit, or some kind of a contractual thing. But the state is a deep pocket. So somebody gets killed over there, or we have a serious rape incident, or sexual attack. Who's going to pay the tab?
It's different for the city and county. In working with the Dlnr, the first requirement was indemnification of the state.
So you folks are prepared to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
thank you. Tabitha Martin?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Tabitha Martin, and I'm speaking on behalf of all homeless, because I am homeless. I have a family, and we reside in Kaka'ako. Basically, all I'm trying to say is put aside all these arguments about disagreements and whatnot, and one simple solution would be empathy.
Please speak up. Is that do we have is there a speaker in the back? I mean, really, it's very difficult to hear any of this. It's none of you have
Mr. Chairman,
microphones.
this gentleman over here, when you yell out without being recognized, it's very disruptive for us.
We can't hear. This is
But I
something that's
understand that.
recorded
I'm just
here.
asking you, raise your hand and have the chairman recognize before you burst out.
Please speak up. I'll remind everyone to please speak up.
Sorry. Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay, well, my family and I reside in Kaka'ako, and we've been through more than a dozen sweeps. what was right. He sees things in black and white. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Confiscation or displacement, they're both wrong. Especially of personal property, personal freedom, and personal pride, which was all taken from many, many, many families and homeless individuals. I just want you to reconsider, and one simple solution, like I said before, would be empathy. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Questions? Thank you very much, Tabitha. Beatrice?
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning, Beatrice. Could you please speak up also?
Yes, I'll do my best here. My name is Beatriz Cantalmal, and I am Amnesty International's Honolulu Chapter School Director and Organizer. I'm going to cut my testimony a little short because of the wonderful job that we already had with the discussion. So I think in the name of not being repetitive, I'm going to focus more on the human rights aspect of Sand Island, as well as the risks that we see and why Amnesty International opposes Sand Island. So the first point, and I'm going to try to stick to the points here. So I'll be referring back and forth between the arguments that has happened, and what we would like to bring up to. So Sand Island is not a housing first initiative. It's a transitional and temporary solution. So I think it's very important that these issues be distinguished, because the mission and the vision and the responsibility of Sand Island proposition really does not address homelessness at its core. That is the responsibility of our government. So the way that the proposal is designed, it really brings a lot of legal concerns, enforcement issues, as well as logistical and unnecessary financial burden to the city. We have already discussed the safety from security and hazardous issues, but on those issues, I think like a couple of things that's worth mentioning is that if we're going to talk about security, my understanding is that private security will be contracted for Sand Island, proposition the way it is, and it's not efficient. It's not proven, to be efficient, and Honolulu police will have to intervene in many instances where they cannot meet the needs there, which will be an additional cost. You have a proposal of $45 million for 100 people for up to a year, where I don't think security really has been, really thought out as part of this. I'm not going to talk about, the hazardous issues because it's already been discussed. Where I would like to talk to in the merit of this issue is that the bills that have been passed, which I find it very interesting, Bill 45 was not passed. And if the homeless people in Oahu, outside Waikiki and downtown districts, deserve the consideration to not have Bill 45 passed, we need to be able to look at Bill 42 and why really it was passed, So these bills that were passed, they were not created with the homeless population best interest in mind, but it was the Waikiki and downtown business community's best interest in mind. And it's at the expense of homeless people's human rights and dignity, we need to look at this differently. You know, we really do. You know, our business here believes that, you know, homelessness affects their profits. It poses safety risks, you know, and ruins buyers' experiences, you know, and they're spending their vacation and money here in Waikiki and downtown districts. I get that, you know, that's one perspective. But their customers do have choices, you know, to either return to Waikiki or go to different vacation destinations. Our homeless people don't. And what the bills that were passed are doing is really forcing them into a situation that is not constitutionally right. You have not options really when you have homeless shelters that, you know, are not really equipped and appropriate for, you know, the needs that are out there, or when you have bills that criminalizes homelessness. The options they're giving right now are two, basically. With the new bills, you either get a citation for being homeless, basically. So if you're sitting on the ground, you're eating, you're asking for money, you know, it's illegal now in Waikiki. So you get cited, you get court dates, you get to be fined for $1,000. You don't get the money to pay for that. You go to jail for about a year, up to a year. I mind saying if you go to jail, it's about $420 a day to house a homeless person there. Okay.
Can you tie your testimony to the
so I'll
agenda item?
tie it back. So basically, you're either faced with that or you're faced with Sand Island. These are not choices. These are not choices. You're not being given choices, you know, and we need to think about that. If we're really going to talk about it, I agree we need to do something about homelessness, but we need to look at housing first. Housing first is not transitional housing and tent encampments that is being proposed. We need to look at wraparound services, trauma-informed care practices. We need to look at employment. We need to look at poverty at state and city level. We need to look at this with a more comprehensive program. You know, if we're really going to address homelessness, you know, this is not okay. This is not right. We do have to protect, you know, homeless people too. We have this responsibility as government. We cannot turn our, you know, face and our policies the other way because it's an issue that we don't think we can tackle. This is the time that we need to come together as a community, as government, and do really something about it. You know, homelessness issues here in Honolulu has needed attention and has needed, you know, solutions for over 30 years. This is really not being addressed. This is not the way to be addressed.
But it's not just, if I may,
Yes.
try not to seem so cold, but it is not within the mission of the Department of Land and Natural Resources to solve the homeless problem. Right now, what's before the board is a request from
Yes.
the city for a program that they want to institute and use state lands. So I understand there's a theme here that there are some philosophical differences in how the homeless issue should be addressed, but that solution is not within the power of the 6 or 7 of us that are sitting here right now.
Point well taken. So we oppose. It's not addressing. It should not be approved. It should not be even considered in the way that's being proposed. It lacks so much expertise. It lacks human rights. It lacks dignity. It lacks so many infrastructural needs in that to really being able to do this in a form that addresses homelessness, you know, properly. So I don't know if that answers it, and really bringing the context of why we're here now, I thought it was very important so that we don't forget, you know, the roots. And we don't forget where we go moving forward, you know, with this plan. You know, homeless people do matter. They should have a voice too. They should be here. They should be consulted as well.
We have someone here, and thank you for providing the context in which the overall discussion is occurring. Any question, Stanley?
Do we have any lawyer here for the city and county? Why don't you come on up here, please?
Morning, Don Kitaoka, Deputy Corporation Counsel on behalf of the city and county.
Can I ask you a few questions about this Bill 42?
To the extent that I have knowledge, yes.
Okay. What does Bill 42 say?
Bill 42 is a bill to impose a restriction on sitting and lying on the sidewalks of Waikiki. So it's a sit-lie ordinance, which basically makes it a violation to sit or lie on a public sidewalk in Waikiki.
And so that would be administered across the board. If there was a tourist that was sitting or lying on the
Well,
sidewalk.
there's a warning provision. Basically, it's not an automatic citation. It is a directive from a law enforcement officer that you shouldn't be sitting or lying on this area, so you have to move on. And that warning is mandated by the law.
What's the constitutional considerations of sort of a status offense? Have you folks checked whether or not it passes muster under the federal and state constitution to have a status offense of this nature only for one neighborhood and not for the whole island?
Well, I'm not at liberty to disclose attorney-client communications with the city council, but I will say that
Disclose it to us or not your clients.
well, as you know, any disclosure of confidential attorney-client privilege communication would be a waiver. So I will just say that the constitutional issues were vetted by the city and the legal department, and the restrictions on constitutionality of these kinds of ordinance were well vetted.
You're satisfied that it passes the federal and state constitution?
I will say that again, I would hesitate to disclose the conclusions between the...
Well, what would you tell a judge in court? Let's put it that way. You, ACLU or some organization saying that this is unconstitutional. If you expect us to help you folks with your problem, then you got to give us some justification why we should.
Okay, I'll put it this way. If the law is signed and enacted, we at the Corporation Council would be, it would be our obligation to defend that law. And to defend that law, we would argue that it is constitutional. In order to defend the law as constitutional, we would cite case precedent in all other jurisdictions which have such sit and lie ordinances and the restrictions that are placed upon those kinds of laws. And that actually went to the Ninth Circuit, and there is a law that, there is a case that vetted the constitutionality of, I believe, San Francisco or Seattle's sit-lie ordinance.
We're not going to debate the law here.
Right, so I would hesitate to debate that law, but the constitutionality of these kinds of laws have been well examined already in the appellate court.
Thank you.
I have a question. Okay, you say you can't sit or lie down or whatever. Now, when you get a parade, people come over during the evening, they sit there on the sidewalk. What happens to these people?
Yeah, there are defined exceptions in the law, including parade viewing or other kinds of activities. Queuing up, for instance, to buy a ticket, those kinds of
You say if I was homeless, okay, parade coming, I can sit there for hours and you're not supposed to be able to arrest me because the parade will be happening, or an event will be happening.
That's a kind of thing where it's just like a murder case, right? People would say, I'm imposing the defense of self-defense. Well, the defense...
I just was asking this question because for me, right now what we're doing is, the city and county impose laws without consequences. And this is what happened. They're trying to rush into something because they want to pass a law and not thinking about, now what we're going to do with all these people?
Right, in fact, that's one of the criteria by which a court would look at these laws to see in fact if the displaced people have a place to go. And that's basically how the courts have looked at it. So,
Is that part of the impetus for the Sand Island project? You're closing down Waikiki, so you guys are coming here to open up Sand Island so that you can pass muster with the court? Are you using us for that?
I'm just a lawyer for the city. I'm not a policy maker, therefore I'm not at liberty to answer a question like that. But I will say that the city is making all efforts to do whatever it can to address the homeless problem. And I think the Housing First initiative is one of those efforts.
Just on that one point, I just want to make a clarification that our initiatives on Housing First are what we're working on any given night. Our emergency shelter spaces across the island, about 153 spaces. This initiative is to help our Housing First program really move up and get started faster, because we know that the issue, that homelessness is something that our community really wants the city to work on. Housing First, there's 100 units with what we have in the city, with about another 100 that we have.
Thank you very, very much. Next testifier is Russell Alfonso, Hawaii Pacific University. Okay, we'll skip Russell, and if he shows up, we'll take his testimony then. Larry Giller.
Your hand.
Okay.
Your intention on this application, and as such, and for other reasons I will give you, basically technical reasons that you should reject the application. But the conversation today, I guess I was surprised. This is a land board, and I know that you must consider beneficial uses of the land, I believe, under the Hawaii State Constitution. So it was, it's appropriate to discuss the public policy and the social needs, and that's the way it went. But something very important came up, and that is the indemnification of the state. You're not indemnified now. The state will be de facto joining with the city in forwarding this plan if you approve the right of entry permit. And you have been told today that there is a possibility that the land itself or nearby lands may be contaminated with a whole list of chemicals and metals and other things. So at this point you're aware that the city and county has not tested that site for suitability for human habitation. Also on the legal aspect, I'm not an attorney, but because I'm intensely interested in this issue and in the welfare of every citizen of Hawaii, including those without homes, the Ninth Circuit, when it considered the Seattle law, said it was constitutional as written. But if you read the ruling, it says that if the law is challenged in its enforcement, in other words, as applied, then the challenge would succeed. This is written into the judgment. So what I would suggest is, if you're concerned about the legal aspects, is please consult your own counsel on this. Don't listen to me, don't listen to the city, because you're going to have to make a decision that the state of Hawaii will be responsible. Treatment. So as applied here, it's correctly applied. People who have no homes need to be interviewed to find out, are they suitable? Do they want to go into a home, because it is a voluntary program? So this is the interview process. But if they're applying for a triage center, this room could be a triage center. So people come in that door, they leave the dogs and the occasional cat outside, okay, and they come in, social workers are over there. Okay, over here could be RN, the nurses to check whatever. Over here could be housing specialists. Over there could be a case manager, so they'll be assigned to somebody who's going to get them into housing. That, to me, would be an example of a triage center. And you could do it in a room like this. But what is presented to you, what's still on that screen over there, is a campsite, which is to be used for housing without a roof, but housing nevertheless, for an indefinite and unspecified period of time, where people will be living on that, in that little yellow spot that was shown to you. That's not a triage center. They may do triage there, but the main purpose of it is that people are going to live in tents there. The city did not, in their application, on page 3 at the bottom, it says, other than the agencies involved in the transfer and disposition, the division did not solicit comments from other agencies. Well, had they solicited comments from the Department of Health, then these minerals and potential contaminants would have come to light at that time. But they did not do so. So here you are today, the testimony is being given to you that the site is potentially polluted. In truth, we don't know, because nobody's dug the hole or whatever you need to do. Nobody's analyzed the air blowing from other sites. Okay? But nevertheless, what they've presented to you on paper is a triage site. What they've presented to you in actuality is a tent city. Now let me comment on the appropriateness of that for this area. At the community meeting on Wednesday, the city managing director, Ember Shin, told everybody, it wasn't, by the way, to consult the community, it was a similar slideshow like this. She was very proud to say that this is the first time that a municipality, that a city has attempted something like this, that prior attempts, and I'm obviously paraphrasing what she said, previous tent cities and so forth have been put together by the community, and they kind of grew, they governed themselves and so forth. She was very proud that this is the first attempt that a city is to put in something like this. In fact, there's a good reason why cities don't do it. Hawaii is not, as Ms. Shin has previously testified to the City Council, in the vanguard of Housing First. This is 2014. Housing First is around since the 1990s, late 1990s. Cities reported on the results as early as 2004, 2006. So we're at least a decade behind. No Housing First program includes this. It's the antithesis. Housing First is, you find, let's say, an apartment or something, and you do triage, you screen who's going to go in there and who will be appropriate. People are placed in housing, even if they have drug problems, alcohol problems, mental health issues. And then they're surrounded by what's called wraparound services, very intensive social and even psychiatric services, to make them successful in staying in that home, make them permanent in that housing. And the statistics show, as early as 2004, even today, that that plan works. Yet, the city and county, and they have no Housing First program yet, it's an RFP. It doesn't exist. The ordinances are about to exist. If the mayor signs his name, then people are going to be transported from the street into someplace.
So Bill 42 hasn't been signed yet?
Has not been signed yet. Unless it's happened today, it hasn't been signed yet. But since I believe it's the mayor's bill, so he's likely to sign it. But by the way, as far as the coercion goes, with voluntary or coercion, people's possessions have been taken and put into garbage trucks. It's documented over and over again. There is coercion involved even now in getting people off the street. It's unlikely that they're going to say, please, please come out to our camp and come into Housing First. Many people won't want to do it. A woman from Kailua at the Wednesday night presentation suggested, why don't you put the social workers on the bus and, you know, like one day a month, whatever, send them to Kailua, and because they have homeless people there, and let them speak to people and begin the process. You know, so there are alternatives to Housing First. I guess I want to not dwell on that. But my point is they have no program. They have about to have an ordinance which will be used punitively. If a bus is right there with a police officer and you say, well, you can move or you can go on the bus and go over there. We don't know how they're going to apply this. You don't know how they're going to apply this. And yet, and you do know that the site has these potential problems. I'm not saying it is polluted. None of us in this room know that it's polluted. That is the reason why you should not approve this. And the toxicity and other, which they admit in the application, they have not consulted other divisions. They persist in calling it in here a triage center. Okay, triage centers do not require to be on Sand Island on that particular piece of land with the potential problems. You could do it in any room in any building in the city. You could interview people. You could do it on the bus in Kailua, and you could provide social services. This is not Housing First by anyone's definition. The 20% of the Housing First budget that they're going to devote to this comes out of taxpayer pockets and could be devoted to Housing First. So I'm not asking you to make a decision based on social issues, whether this is a good thing to do, a bad thing to do. I'm asking you to reject the plan because it's asking you, through misrepresentation, to enter into a scheme for which, well, yes, you may be liable for, but it's inappropriate for the state to support this. The state has task forces going on Housing First. Their plan is to put in a proper Housing First program. The state is not proposing on their side to have a tent city. So please do not approve a place where people, but pollution on it, where if they're on the side of the road, yeah, they're living in all kinds of chemicals and so forth. But the state has not arranged that. They've done that voluntarily. They're choosing to live in a bad environmental place. It's their choice. Okay,
I don't know if that's correct.
Well,
That's your opinion.
no, I've spoken to people. It's not my opinion. The parks are closed to them. They have no place to stay. The city ordinances have forced them to the side of the sidewalk. Over and over, people say this, and the ordinances support it. You cannot stay in the park after 10. So where do the people go? They're homeless. Again, I'm not here to argue the social service, only the practical implication that the state is making an area available, and it has certain characteristics which may include contamination. The state is joining with the city in saying this is okay and this is something the state believes is okay to do. You cannot, in my view, escape liability for that. But more important, it's not the right thing to do to approve a triage center, which is in actuality a tent city. So,
thank you. Question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that's the end of the sign-up list. So I'll start on the left here. Anyone wishing to testify? And if you could please keep it to tie it into the agenda item.
Aloha no. Some of you are new. I'm not sure if you know me. My name is Pono Kealoha. I am a Hawaiian Kingdom subject, yes. I kind of have informed the other people. Mr. Ayala knows me pretty well. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up, yeah? Okay? And especially you, Mr. Ayala. Until Kamana'o Crab's letter is replied to, and I've asked you many times for the Treaty of Annexation, everything that you are doing is documented as a national and international war crime.
So you're opposed.
By your laws that you are,
I'm
by.
trying to help you tie it to the agenda item. So
Well, this
you're
is the
opposed.
agenda, because we have 26% Kanakamo'oli that are houseless,
So
and
you're-
this is our home.
So you're opposed to the agenda item?
I'm
because-
opposed to
because-
the agenda because your laws don't belong here in the first place.
Okay.
I ask you also to do due diligence as far as thinking of these people that you're gonna be putting in this little so-called tent city. You're also gonna be responsible for that too, yeah? Okay? But again, everything you're doing is illegal. National, international laws. You should take it up with your boss. Are we illegally occupied? How did we become part of the USA? Mahalo.
Next testifier on the left. Your name for the record, if you could speak up.
Thank you, Board. My name is Michael Daly. I would like to ask, Chair, if you're expecting to make a decision on this today, or what the process is.
Well, it's scheduled for discussion, and potentially we may or may not make a decision. I think we're certainly gonna have a discussion with our attorneys. So it's scheduled. There may or may not be a decision today.
Thank you. I'm opposed to using for this board to provide a permit to the city and county of Honolulu for access to Sand Island. It's been an internment camp before and other camps. It seems to be a historic place where you put people that you don't want. There's a public relations problem here, if not anything else. The world's going to come and look at this. Sand Island rings bells. It was an internment camp for the Japanese, and it's been used as other camps. There's something wrong with that site, that it's being used for these purposes. I don't know what it is. I think it can be fixed, but it's like a toxic, I'm using that word metaphorically, but I believe that it's actually physically toxic as well from what people are saying. We don't know. I'd just like to introduce myself. I feel like I'm a critical stakeholder in all of this that's been going on. I've been to every single hearing on Bill 42 at the council, through every committee meeting. I've travelled over the other side of the island when they've had meetings there. I've listened to the testimony. The best that they come up with, the best that the supporters of Bill 42 have come up with, is that people are, homeless people are defecating on the sidewalk, they're in the way, there are obstacles. There are all these superficial arguments, but they're not addressing the proper solution, which is, of course, housing first. And they're still not. They're providing another temporary Band-Aid solution that looks like it won't work. I've been homeless. I live in Waikiki. I have friends who are homeless who stop by my business. I work on the street in Waikiki on the sidewalk. The homeless come up to me looking for $1, a conversation, anything. I'm an artist. I work with my easel. When I leave my house, they're on the street. When I take a friend or a visitor to a restaurant, we have to pass by them. You know, I'm a designer too. I've worked in advertising agencies and design houses in Sydney, New York, and Honolulu. I'm aware of the corporate image that they like to project. I know how much they spend on displays and lighting. And it comes down to free speech. Because actually, oddly enough, lying down on the sidewalk or sitting down on the sidewalk is a matter of free speech.
If you can tie it to the action, because we're not gonna debate free speech and we're not gonna debate Bill 42 or 43.
All right,
The
true
only
enough.
action before the board right now is whether or not to issue a right of entry to the county. And these-
The thing is that you, all right, I've got it. The fact is that it would be irresponsible for this board to give access to the city. I'll tell you why. Because it's all stems from rushing Bill 42 through, the sit and lie law, which was pushed by Waikiki Improvement Association, the two businesses in Waikiki. The other one is Waikiki Business Improvement District. The city does not care. I believe that the city does not care if Sand Island is approved or not. Except insofar as I just heard the lawyer say that the city, they think that the city's not going to pass constitutional muster if they can't prove that they're providing some sort of shelter for the homeless people that they're harassing on the sidewalk. So, you know why I'm saying they don't care? They don't care because yesterday, or was it the day before, they passed Bill 42 without having anything in place. They could have deferred Bill 42 until they spoke to you. That I would think would be the respectable thing to do. They've kind of pushed you into some sort of corner, or think that they have. And I would be very upset if I was sitting on your side of this table. If they cared, when at the meeting on a couple of days ago, there were multiple business owners from Waikiki that came to the meeting, and all of them, and the written testimony, you can go online and see it, they're all saying that by disrupting the homeless people in this way, that it's compassionate because it's going to push them to services.
You're getting us back into the debate about Bill 42.
Well, not exactly. They're making this a facility as a way of saying that they're providing services. And the argument is that we push Bill 42 through, and this is we care for the homeless. But they don't care for the homeless, because I don't see the corporates here today that were there the other day. They should be here with us, and there's some yet to speak.
Force anybody to be here.
I know, but where are they? It's evidence that there's a lack of care. If I was a business owner in Waikiki today, I'd be very happy that Bill 52 was through. We can harass the people on the sidewalk. I know what it's like to be harassed on the sidewalk. I've been arrested multiple times on the charge of peddling.
Mr. David,
yeah.
I've got a question for you. You seem to have the expertise and the ear, it seems, for the homeless, and you have compassion, which we all do. Getting back to the subject, what would you think, through your travels or your meetings, that the homeless would want in regards to Sand Island?
With regard, you're saying, you're projecting that this will go ahead?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying to get the feedback from the homeless people of being put into this transitional period or this area of Sand Island. Let's get back to the subject.
All right.
What do you think, since you have the ear from them?
Well, as far as the Waikiki homeless people, I can't see them traveling that distance. There's only, they're saying there.
But you can't see. Have you heard anything from the homeless people?
I spoke to a homeless people before I entered this building, and I invited him here just to even listen. He has been chronically homeless for 10 years or more, and I see him regularly. I've drawn his picture, and he's one of my friends. he started to come over with me. As we were just talking, he got very angry because he sees this as being... When he found out that they passed a law that makes it illegal to lie on the sidewalk, that's his only refuge in the world at night, the sidewalk. And this person may or may not have some mental issues, but he's not a drug addict. He wants transitional employment programs. The homeless of Waikiki are not going to travel that far. Others in other parts of the city may go there. It may be a disaster and not work at all, and no one will be attracted there except the gangs. It may be that it becomes overcrowded and people go there. Either way, I just see a problem because of the motive. The motive was to pass 42, not to provide proper care for the homeless. They rushed it through. The motive stands up in a court of law. The motive is there. When this is constitutionally challenged, when I talk about free speech, the public forum, they...
that's going to be associated with Bill 42.
Yes, it is.
Not with this action, so.
Yeah.
If you could wrap up any other concerns that you have regarding the agenda item.
All right. I believe that I've addressed everything that I want to here, and I commend you for your apparent concern on this issue. There are solutions to the housing situation, and I would love to see my friends and the people who come by at Waikiki to be in permanent housing. Low-cost housing, units that cost less than $5,000. This doesn't have to be brick and mortar. There's plenty of opportunities to do other things. Leave them where they are for the time being. It's not good, but spend the money and the energy and the resources on permanent housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, continue on the left. Nobody on here. Okay. Oh, hang on a second. Are you gonna? I'm starting left to right, so. We'll get to everybody. We're gonna go like this, left to right.
Aloha. Aloha, Chair and members of the board. Mahalo for nui loa for this opportunity to testify. My name is Laulani Teal. I'm from the Ho'opai Pono Peace Project, and Kalamai, I'll do my best to speak up. I'd like to address a few concerns that have been expressed to me in relation to cultural trauma issues that may be related to the granting of this right of entry permit to the state and to the city by the state. And so these are just for your consideration. One thing that I think is important to recognize is that, first of all, as I'm sure that many of you know, Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiians, make up a large portion of the houseless population. I should say too that my background is in public health as well as in Ho'oponopono and other cultural peacemaking, and so from both of those perspectives, it's very, very important to address trauma, because whenever a permit is given for something to take place, then whatever impacts you have, if those are creating trauma, then in order for peace to take place, that trauma needs to be addressed, or you need to really look at what trauma could potentially be created before granting a permit to do anything. As I was saying, there are a large portion of Kanaka Maoli houseless among this population. Now, there are also a number, there's a large concern in the non-houseless Kanaka Maoli community. And there are other cultural concerns that are not Kanaka Maoli, but are others, such as the historic trauma that, for example, comes through the Japanese internment camps. You know, as was mentioned earlier, the Sand Island, you know, whether the exact location lines up or not, the historic use of Sand Island, first of all, as a quarantine station for ships that came in from different places during the kingdom time, where people were held whenever presumed potentially diseased, you know, and much of the trauma that happened surrounding that. Then the internment of the Japanese during World War II in that Sand Island area. And then following that, you know, eventually the garbage dump in that area was cleaned up by fishermen who created a fishing community, as you know, that kind of thrived there for quite a while until that was demolished quite dramatically by the state in the 1980s. So, you know, that history does have an impact on people, you know, on many different people. And I think that it's important to really look at what is being proposed and the trauma that would have in our community. The houseless population amongst the Kanaka Maoli houseless population, you know, and there are many different people, but one thing that if anybody's ever worked with the communities, such as, you know, out in Makua or out in various places around the island where villages begin to form, you know, one of the things that you kind of know is that a lot of the people that are there because they're of a certain spirit, you know, that doesn't do well what we would call in the box, you know. They're not going to do well in a program that's highly structured, you know, that is very restrictive, that demands that they, you know, follow these steps to get a job and adjust to the system. That's why they're out there living on the land somewhere, you know, whether it's under a bridge or in a shack that they've made or whatever the case may be. They're living there because they fulfill a certain cultural role in the society that's been there for a very long time.
Can you tie that to the agenda?
Okay, so
because we're getting into philosophical.
Well, the reason is that if you grant the right of entry permit, what I'm saying is that one thing that it's important to understand is that one thing that's acknowledged in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the free expression of one's personality. And when that personality is not just, you know, how the person looks, feels, or acts, but is actually tied to a culture and some very old roots, then, you know, in order to stop that completely is actually to destroy a part of a culture and not to acknowledge a certain kind of human right. So therefore, you know, if you create a situation or you facilitate, in which, you know, many feel that this right of entry permit would do, if you facilitate a course of action that basically shuts down one type of people, one type of lifestyle, you know, who are not going to get a 9-to-5 job. They're not going to, you know, adapt to a certain cultural paradigm, you know, then, you know, that creates a lot of trauma because you've created a situation in which those people cannot exist. They cannot survive, So that is something that I think needs to be considered.
Question for you. So I follow exactly what you're saying. So in this proposal of right of entry,
Right.
what do you propose or what options you think the board should have or the county should have or everyone in concern, the stakeholders of this particular area? What would you propose or what would be your options?
Well,
I'm assuming you're opposing to this.
Yeah, I definitely do think that there needs to be some very serious consideration of of these issues of cultural trauma, yes. I think that the current right of entry permit, because it is tied to the city and county's proposal for this facility, which is, as was pointed out earlier, also tied with a larger plan that the city and county has, which involves, basically forcing people into this. That's why people are referring to it as internment, because of the force element. That probably should not go forward as is. Now, if you're asking me what I would do if I could in that area or any other area, it would be a lot different, But that's not what's before the board right now.
What's before the board is a right of entry from the city and county to enter there to put a transitional facility.
Exactly, and it's a specific transitional facility. So what I'm saying is that I think that the cultural impacts need to be considered, that you folks need to have the information to be able to consider the cultural impacts that are part of this picture before granting such a permit.
When you say cultural impacts, are you referring to a specific group, or is it a Hawaiian cultural impact that you're alluding to?
As I said, I think that there are a number of cultural impacts, and they're not only Hawaiian. My expertise personally is in Hawaiian culture. I work in the Hawaiian community, trying to improve dialogue and helping to articulate matters. So that's what I'm here to do today. However, I do want to emphasize that it is not only Hawaiian culture. It was actually that area originally, way back when it was a quarantine station, even before the Japanese internment camps. It was a quarantine station, and at that time, there were questions over, who was allowed in and why did people think that they were diseased or not, and so it was for ships coming in, but it wasn't necessarily, a lot of that was based on economics. So even Americans have, that, and others from other places, Portuguese, other people also have, have historic ties that go to that place. And so that, I just want to say that there is cultural trauma that is not just Hawaiian culture as well.
So we understand.
But I'm mostly here to address the Hawaiian cultural issues because that's my area of expertise, and that's my area that in which, I've been asked to provide dialogue to try to open up communication regarding these things and to make sure that you folks know about these things, So I think
Have you had any communications with the Kanaka Maoli regarding this site?
Yes.
And they are what?
Well, certainly we have many Kanaka Maoli, and there are many different viewpoints. However, within many aspects of the community that I've spoken to, there are major concerns. Those concerns go towards two major areas, I would say. One is the impact on the Kanaka Maoli houseless themselves, and in particular, the cultural practitioners, I would say, of a certain lifestyle that would be impacted because that lifestyle cannot exist in a facility such as is being proposed by the city, who is requesting the right of entry permit. So that is one aspect. The other aspect has to do with the role of Kanaka Maoli in the broader community as a host culture. And so, I think as was pointed out earlier, there's a strong feeling that that many, as a host culture, that there should be an ability to take care of people. That's why there are things like the Kanawai Mamalahoi, the law of the splintered paddle, which protect, literally it says, that those who moe ikiala, or who sleep in the road, should be protected from harm at all times. It's a very serious law. This is the first law of the Hawaiian Kingdom, issued by Kamehameha, his very first law, and it's in the, it's been enshrined in the Hawaii State Constitution. It's certainly never died, and for many people, it's very, very important cultural principle, as well as one that also addresses a broader array of human rights that now are internationally acknowledged. So I think that it's very, very important to understand that there is trauma in the community that's beyond just the Kanaka Maoli houseless population. There's also trauma related to the inability to exercise what people feel is both their right and their responsibility, their kuleana, as the culture that is, whether they're the kingdom or their own sovereignty.
Okay, so you've made a good case. I think the board understands what you're saying, and the board also understands that it has, with traditional customary practices, we acknowledge that, but we also have a right, a responsibility to balance that with public health and safety. So that's my response to that. And if we could move on.
Okay, so I would just like to say that I think that one thing that I think that the board should understand is that there are two really important cultural concepts here: the concept of ea and the concept of aloha. And those two concepts need to be exercised. And so ea relates, as in ua mau ke ea o ka aina I ka pono. Ea is the sovereign life breath of every person. And for that to be able to be exercised in the way that's right is the healing for cultural trauma. And when that's not able to be exercised, you have increased trauma. So I think that's very important. And also aloha, that it's very, very important that people be able to exercise their aloha, whether it's for you folks, making decisions, and also for those who need to be able to share aloha between each other, between themselves, and to those who need help. Okay, mahalo.
Thank you. Okay, mahalo.
Mr. Chairman, may I distribute these to each one of us, please? That would speak for documents.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to, again,
I will keep it.
We're not going to debate the homeless.
Absolutely, no, there's no debate.
Homeless issues. If you can keep it to the agenda item.
I will do my very best. Well, today the guitar is over there, just in case.
So we're not going to debate international rights too,
No,
okay?
no.
All right.
Not. Okay, I'll sit down and see how formally. Good morning. My name is Lico Martin, and
before I say anything, I had an uncle who passed away last year, who was homeless in Kaka'ako. He was a legislator, and his fight was to die with dignity. I don't know what he would say if he were here, Uncle Jugi. I'm sure he would have something to say, so I will do my best, being homeless and living on Sand Island at the age of 15 years old. Even his own family would not allow him to come to the family house. The documents that I have in front of you, I think are very important. One of them is a memorandum, an unclassified memorandum from the State Department that was received by all governors, I'm hoping here in Hawaii too, with respect to the human rights treaty reports. And on the first page, the one specific important thing is that it's saying that it's important because the implementation of these treaties are at all levels, even the general public. It says here, I'll just read it briefly. For example, one of these committees expressly urged the United States to make government officials, the judiciary, federal, state law enforcement officials, teachers, social workers, and public in general aware about the responsibilities of the state party under the convention, because implementation of these treaties may be carried out by officials at all levels of government. Okay, just to give you something to stand on. Okay, you know, you have something to stand on. As I have come to know it, the treaty is the supreme law of the land, and that should not exclude human rights treaties and the responsibilities that go to it. So whatever situation that we have maybe come to this point, the human rights factor and the treaties that go along with that. Now these are especially to the governors. The mayors also receive this. Okay, but this is a report that I'm offering to you was submitted to the United Nations Human Rights Committee on August 23rd, 2013. And it was put together by, as you can see, it's the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty. And as hopefully that you will read it, that you will get an idea of the complexity of the issues here. And so that in this example, in this application, I went to, that it not be entertained at this time, because I went to the county council meetings. I grew up at the foot of Diamond Head. The hotel people are screaming about the homeless. I can scream about the hotels when I could walk all the way on the seawall, all the way. What happened to our space? And where I ended up in that conversation, and the question that Jimmy Gomes, that you asked, okay, the pu'uhonua, without discrimination. I have seen it in my lifetime when I left Honolulu and went to Big Island to live in the early 70s after we lost our fight at Kalama Valley. Okay, we went there and there was a woman there, Declara Manese. She's a great-granddaughter of Chief Kealoha. And one day, two of her sons, grandnieces, were up at the Konawaina school. And they were accosted by a teacher. When she found out, not what her, and because these 16-year-old boys, they're not boys, they've been pulling blue eye all night long. They're not boys, they were just tired. They took that teacher out. Well, of course, they shut down the school. But when she found out why the boys had done this, okay? Well, what she did was she pulled all the Hawaiian kids, every Hawaiian kid out of Konawaina school, and brought them down to the Pu'uhonua Honau, where I was staying. In the first pili hale that was built since the time of Captain Cook, other than what you had in a park, okay? And I mentioned this at the county council, Pu'uhonua. And this is a serious thing, okay? The Pu'uhonua is the cultural answer. There was no discrimination. The first reason for the Pu'uhonua was not about, it was security. And when they came down, you couldn't even, the national park was wondering, oh my gosh, are they coming back into the Pu'uhonua? The disgrace of it all, in the example of Pu'uhonua, okay? Yes. to Sand Island. I've lived on Sand Island.
Okay, so tie
Okay.
what you're saying to Sand Island, or we gotta.
You really gotta check. Is it or is it not a brownfields? As a responsibility over Hawaiian homelands, right? Okay, that has to be something. And so far as, I mean, from here, I'm gonna go over to go see the mayor, because I think he needs to get this too. Because you will find in there, just as an example, this is from the Human Rights Committee report on the U.S. reports. It says here, criminalization of homelessness. While the federal state have done all this, the state party should engage with state, abolish the laws and policies criminalizing homelessness. It doesn't, it's not back there. It's not gonna work. So I am against it. I think in the future, Chairman, that the idea of whether it's on private land, if we had private land, yeah, we make our pu'uhonua. And the rest of it can stay out. We make our own rules. It was very, very clear in there. The family knew were there, they had there. And they went there for their safety. It was not about books and things. It was about safety, survival, and taking care of family. All the family. Okay, so thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy reading that, because that should make you strong to know, because it's a huge, huge issue.
Okay.
Okay, mahalo.
Dan, we're just gonna take.
Well, we have some, might have some contested case hearing requests. I know I have one, and some investor league might have one, so I can either, maybe I can comment, provide my testimony, and or provide an opportunity.
So if you want a contested case, say it verbally now.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do.
Anybody else want a contested case? Okay, say it verbally now.
Might be able
Request
to-
I request a contested case hearing on the subject.
I request a contested case
Okay,
hearing.
now follow up in writing, within 10 days. If you want a contested case, follow up in writing within 10 days, okay? All the folks, okay, so Land Division is gonna fall on Land Division to get all of their names, okay? So before you leave, make sure that Barry gets your name, okay?
I'm here.
And then make sure that you file the proper forms, and we can go on with that. Okay, so I'm gonna, again, go to the left, Arvid. And if you could, two things, speak up and then keep your testimony to the agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Isla, members of the Department of Land and Natural Resources Board of Directors. I may want to ask a question, first of all, Chair. Are you a 7-member board or a 6-member board? Does the AG
We're a
have a vote?
7-member board, we have 1 member that's not in attendance
Absent.
today.
So if you have a 3-3 split, then you would either have to kill it,
If there's a 3-3 split, it's a non-action.
non-action. You can't bring it back again, or you could,
That's
up to the board.
that's a question for an attorney.
Can you
Attorney.
tell what your name is? I missed your name, sir.
Mr. Rory?
Rory.
My name is Arvid Youngquist, sir.
Okay.
Previously, I was a member of the Kalihi Palama Neighborhood Board, a board in which Sand Island lies. I am against this permit request mainly because it's for immediate occupancy. I believe the question was asked by Board Member Gomez about the area in which the ramp, the asphalt material will be covered, about 10% of the permitted land mass. I believe it should be made a requirement that it would be 100% in concrete. That's a minimum. I'm still against this proposal and request by the city and county because of its two proximities. One is the viaduct leading up to the airport. The homeless people live there. There have been 2 bodies discovered there in the last 2 years. And those people, homeless people, they have to forage for supplies and food. Now, there is a hiking distance from the proposed location of this conceptual layout. A healthy person with a nice hiking boots or running shoes can walk all the way to the airport 18 years ago, I was a volunteer at the airport, USO. I was told, and I did witness many problems with squatting, and I was told there was panhandling. Since this is a voluntary facility that's being considered, and it's 24 hours, 7 days a week, people can come and go as they please. And if you can revisit the point that was made, you're only going to have one guard at the shack and one roving security guard. I used to be a security guard myself. You need at least 4 minimum. If you want to be safe, you need 100 or 40 if you're going to start with 40 people from Waikiki. If you approve this, you're going to have to approve a facility that would have to provide the need of the rest of the island and to be housed in Waihewa, in Pearl City, and there's one more area, because the bill being recommended by Councilmember Ron Menor covers 5 additional council districts. That's downtown, Chinatown, Makali Moili, Ili, Kailua. Do some of you live in those areas? That leaves only 3 council districts not covered. That's Councilmember Pine's district, current council member and future Senate member Rina Remoto, and Ikaka Anderson's district. I'm sorry, not Ikaka Anderson, but Chair Martin's district. If rest of the council districts want the sit and lie laws to apply to them as well with this new bill, then if they get it approved like they got the rest of the bills approved, then their homeless people are going to require the same. And hopefully they're not all going to be sent to Sand Island. So I ask you, either hold it or abstain. If you abstain, enough people abstain, then you're going to have a 3 and 3 abstention. I noticed that there were at least 2 people with some reservations. Some people may feel that they're being pressured, stampeded for some reason. You feel that if you don't take action and you just sit there and do nothing, then the city and county will blame you for failing to provide a transitional housing. So I'm not going to pressure you to make that decision. You make your own conscientious decision on your own, and you decide if you think this is Pono. And one more thing, tourists know a lot more about the broken paddle thing than most of us do. Everything that was cited made mention of what's in the literature, what Clayton He used to say. One place that tourists see as they go by on the tour bus is visit the statue of King Kamehameha. At the foot is the Hawaiian words for that. And the hand that holds all those leis, the long ones in his hand, points to Iolani Palace, which was not built when he was the first king. So I thank you for your questions that you have asked. I can see the great matters going through. I mean, even the quiet ones, I can tell. So please, do what is right in your heart, because you have to live with it. Come May, not May, December the 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay. Albert, make sure, I don't know if you requested a contested case, but make sure
I did
that.
not.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your time. I know how boring these meetings are. It's just as boring on our side as it is on your side. But, so I'm going to stick with just some points.
Your name?
My name is Dlnr. I'm a physicist. I graduated from the University of Hawaii, graduated with honors. I've been homeless for about 3 years now. I've got a company that's planning to build secure shelter because that's what a homeless person needs. He doesn't need to be supervised. He needs a safe, secure place where he makes the rules. That's what all you have. That's what makes us Americans. That's what makes us comfortable. So let me get on with a few things because there's been some misstatements that are made here. Susan Wagner spoke a couple of days ago to the legislature about the Housing First program. And one of the things she said was, let me get this right, sidewalk ordinance laws just do not work. The cost of administrating them is much higher than the cost of providing housing. Another one of her statements was, when you cluster everybody in a compound, whatever you want to call it, you create an instant ghetto. Because you do have a drug dealer and you do have a person who is mentally ill. And they influence the other people. They're not as bad off. So don't create a ghetto. Housing First is to put people in individual permanent housing. I've got her phone number, if you'd like it. The issue has come up about the contamination of Sand Island. Since there's a lot of white hair here, you may remember back when Sand Island Dump was on the front cover of Time magazine, many, many years ago, 1970. A photographer, Ralph Nader, came out here and just did pictures of trash dumps. And for some reason it was picked to be put on Time magazine. And you can still hear echoes of that uproar. That's the Sand Island we're talking about. Has the city got an NFA letter from the EPA? Who could speak for the city?
Okay, you can bring it up in the testimony.
An NFA is a no further action. The reason I know this is I applied to put a building on 357 King Street in conjunction with the Housing Committee. It was turned down because there were leftover pellets of macadam, tar, the stuff you make roads out of. So anyone in this room that decides they're going to cover it over, it's an instant failure as far as the EPA is concerned. So you wonder in this assessment how much real thought has gone into this. Mr. Stanley Rohek, you hit the nail right on the head. The mayor has realized that he's not getting anywhere beating this mule with a stick, so he threw out a carrot. He threw out a carrot that you have to provide, because that was done right before the vote to kind of ease everyone's conscience about taking the people, or having justification for taking the people off the street and putting them in a compound. They're talking about security in a guard shack. I may be wrong on this, but about 13 years ago, the aluminum on the rails of the bridge that you've seen in the earlier pictures was stolen. It wasn't reported for about 2 months. That's how much security Sand Island has. FEMA has just changed the rules on where you're allowed to have habitation with reference to the high tide line. That was since Sandy's, so they may not be up to date on that. I lived on Sand Island. I was in the United States Coast Guard when I came out here in 1966. It is a not desolate place, but it is a hard to get to place. The rules, and we're looking at the rules for building homeless housing, they say things like you need to be within a quarter mile of grocery stores. You need to have restaurants in the area. Where are the restaurants? Where are the grocery stores in that location? Most of the people we've been talking about are kapuna. They can't haul bags that far. What's the number of the bus that goes down Sand Island Access Road? Does anyone know that? Yes, there is. It's a number 10 bus. It turns at the Marine Hardware store. It used to go all the way to the end okay? It was discontinued because they didn't want people occupying Sand Island Park. The easiest way to cure that was to cut the bus off up about where McKesson is. It worked. They talk about a shuttle bus. A shuttle bus works great from the airport to Waikiki. A shuttle bus works great from a neighborhood area to take kids to school and then go back at 3 o'clock and pick them up and bring them back. What the mayor is proposing is some quote-unquote shuttle service, and when he doesn't even know he has a number 10 bus that could be extended about a mile. You really have to wonder how much thought has gone into this process. Jun Yang, and I talk to him often, thinks that this is a plan. And on the surface, it appears to be a plan. But has it really been thought out? Has anyone here had a heart attack or a stroke? Okay. What do you think the difference in a heart attack and stroke of a 40-minute ambulance ride is? They're talking about taking the worst people that need this program the most, the physically handicapped, the people that are hurting, and then they're going to move them probably 30 minutes or 40 minutes further away from Queens Medical Center. Does that make sense? Are we trying to kill these people or are we trying to help them? And triage is a word that's been thrown around. Triage is a military term, and it has to do with this. You've had a massive battle. You have people that are terribly wounded. They are not going to recover. You let them go. You have another group of people that are lightly wounded that you can help. Then you got a third group of people called walking wounded. They can help with the people that are lightly wounded. You can save 2/3 of your force. So what they're doing is they're focusing, and I'm not being, hard-hearted about this, but they're focusing all their energies on the people least likely to survive. And a gate guard shack. That sounds good. I was at Next Step Shelter, and let me tell you, the guards were the worst criminals that operated there. And I say that because I watched them steal and take the poorest people in town. I saw them take their property. Lynn Bailey, who works over at the health department, her phone number is 586-4353, is the one that can tell them right away that asphalt is a pollutant. You could never put people sleeping on asphalt. Someone here mentioned cover the whole thing with concrete. That's going to cost more money than the whole program is going to take. My biggest concern is the isolation. Kapuna and people that are handicapped, where is the nearest grocery store? Does anyone know? Costco. Okay? And Costco caters to people that show up in a truck or a big van to haul away a week's worth of groceries. Can you imagine? Oh, they don't provide plastic bags or any kind of bags. Okay? So they don't want you to buy small amounts of stuff. You can buy cranberries in 5-pound bags. So what's the logic? How is it going to help people to be that far away from the nearest grocery store? The nearest fast food restaurant is McDonald's up on Nimitz. Now, how is it going to be? The mayor may decide to extend the bus, and I think that'd be a really good move, and get a bus, at least a bus that's coming every half an hour to take you up to Nimitz or King Street or wherever. That's where number 10 goes. This is going to impact Handyvan tremendously, because every person they put on Sand Island, based on their criteria, is going to be a handicap. Almost by definition, they'll be a Handyvan card carrier. How is that going to impact the Handyvan system? You now have 100 people who have the access and a phone call and no other means of getting to and from their shopping, getting to or from their medical appointments, getting to or from anywhere. I've been a resident manager of buildings. I did it when I was in college, and I've done it most recently. You really have to address the needs of the individual people. You can't categorize them as somehow this is what I'm going to give them. You have to accommodate their needs, and this site does not accommodate their needs. Like I said, the mayor's plan of using a stick to beat the people out of Waikiki didn't work. So right before the vote, they come up with the carrot. Only it wasn't even his carrot. You're the guys that got to put out the land. And I think this plan will fail miserably. In designing buildings for the homeless, our criteria is attractiveness. If it's not attractive, nobody's going to go there. Not you, not a homeless person. Yes, sir.
Question. In your expertise, as you say, in building homes for homeless, what would be a cost factor?
Okay, right now we're looking at shipping containers. My architect, Jim Schmidt, is the top overall architect in the state of Hawaii, on this island, excuse me. He also builds on the other island. He couldn't be here today. What they really want is security at night and safety, and a place to keep their stuff. A 45-foot shipping container gives you 360 square feet. They can be purchased in excellent condition for $3,000. Now, there's a lot of amenities that need to be added to that. There's safety considerations, and we're looking into them, and we're covering all those bases. But most of the homeless, single men.
Excuse me. You said you can purchase 45, not 40 footers, 45 shipping containers for $3,000?
No, 45-foot shipping containers.
45 foot? $3,000?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I just say it?
I can't even buy it.
What?
I can't even buy these containers. Where I'm from, I'm buying containers that cost $6,500 for a 40-foot container.
Are you buying them from Francis? Who are you buying them from?
Yeah, there's a couple people on the island you can buy them.
Serious?
Yeah. No, they offered us a price of $8,500.
If they got a small little dent in the corner of it that doesn't affect the internal part of it, you get it for $2
Okay,
grand.
so
all right. So, well, I'm just curious.
Okay, you curious?
I want to put a homeless guy in a 45-foot container.
Jimmy, give
what will
me-
it cost? I can talk to you later.
Okay.
Get back to the subject.
Let's get
What do you
back to
got?
the subject. The subject is about $3,000 for the raw cost of the container. Then you have another $2,000, $3,000 for the bathroom. Then that's the amenities that you want to put into it. Ventilation is very important. Safety is very important.
Although it's not pertaining to Staten Island, but I'm just curious for future comment on this. Thank you.
Well, the point of the containers is you have private security. You determine when you come and go. And you're sheltered from the elements. I could go on, but you need your time.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk to you, Jimmy, and I'd love to talk to you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. What's number 2?
Hi, Lisa Mitchell, and just thanking you folks for actually listening to a lot of these testimonies. Really appreciate it. And ideally, I would like to support the city, but I feel that it's not a good idea in this location, and feel that this homeless problem, of course, is not going to go away. And we've seen the First Step shelter, as well as the other one out in Waianae, they've all become permanent shelters. So again, we have a really big problem here. And I remember when, in the 80s, when the real estate values came up really high, and people were asking for mobile homes, parks. And the state said no. And this is a result of some bad decisions, I feel like, that government has again and again made over a long period of time. And until we address those issues from that level, on a very basic level, we're going to continue having these problems. So two of the basic issues I feel like definitely is the real estate in Hawaii is just insane. I mean, it's how do we afford it unless you know, aspire to work in city government or have a business or have some kind of financial means or some kind of financial plan. But if you are just, I keep saying this, if you just march to the beat of a different drum, you don't have a place to live. And this is really a very sad thing, especially here in Hawaii, where we're supposed to be the Aloha State, where we had places like City of Refuge, where everybody did have a place to live. So, of course, what some of the Hawaiian community is talking about is, and what I see, I mean, blend the two together. Okay, so nobody's asking you to give up your home or your private property, but there is public property that can be created in a different way that can utilize space a lot better. I've been trying to talk to people about when you look at a parking structure, you have all these different levels of parking, and people have mobile home parks on the mainland. So if we had something similar, you don't even need a vehicle. People are already living on the sidewalk with nothing. If each person had an individual little parking space in these parking structures that you could put potted plants, have a little bit of lighting, compost toilets, some kind of water for showers. There's solar bags. There's other ways we can go about this if we look for different opportunities, different solutions.
Okay, Lisa, can I get you back to the agenda, because that's really not within the power of the board right now. We're discussing whether or not to issue a right of entry and a lease to the county.
The good side to this, what the city's doing, is it's opening up a huge, bigger discussion that needs to be looked at. And if you folks are willing to provide some kind of space in a way that is a positive, because there's so many people in need of basic housing. And I suppose, on the good side too, if the city is willing to allow a more creative encampment, or whatever you want to call it, as well as the state allowing that too, then there might be possibilities for that.
So I would respond this way to your question. If there's any organization that came to us with a well thought out financed project, we certainly have land available. So we certainly, I think, would bring something to the board, because we do want to help with the overall issue. But somebody has to come to us with a credible plan in a place where we have land, and more importantly, in a place where the neighbors are going to accept. Okay.
Well,
so that's just out there for anyone. You got a plan, you got a financial means to encumber that plan, we would certainly consider it. Okay.
I appreciate that, and I just want to bring up again about the federal property, federal housing. There's a place called Little Makalapa that has homes that are huge, two-story homes that are very dilapidated near Radford High School, and probably the infrastructure is there. And that's one tiny piece of land that hasn't been looked at. And I understand that the Army on Schofield, Wheeler, and Fort Shafter are supposed to be downsizing. If the state of Hawaii could support those efforts, that would open up huge amounts of housing, as you would already know.
And there's other state agencies as well as the county whose responsibility, Kuleana, is to look at those things. Not this board right now, but certainly I think the city has heard your suggestion and will look into it. Judy's saying yes, he's shaking his head yes. Okay?
So appreciate your willingness to listen and be open to more suggestions in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Let me finish going this way. Anybody? Okay.
I'm Christopher Nova Smith.
Okay. Can you speak up?
Yeah.
And tied to the agenda.
Yeah. So we got a couple things we got to worry about here. We got a low capacity and we have trust that we got to be concerned about here. I know it may be inconvenient to listen to the same thing from several different people over and over again, but like I had a few of my friends was basically dissed for a belief that they've had for God, over a century. And I'm keeping it to this.
No. When you say dissed,
Yeah, I'm getting to it.
What do you mean by dissed?
When someone brings up something that happened maybe 120 years ago, and they're having concerns about that today because it's been unresolved, it may be inconvenient to listen to it, and I do respect your patience and how you were calm about it, but you cut them off.
I was trying to bring them back to
Yeah.
the agenda item, so.
But we need to remember that it is still unsolved. It's 300, see, when they bring it up maybe 3-4 times to you guys, personally from them, they got to deal with it for 365 days a year, right? So you may hear it every day. They speak of it just a few times. But to get back to my point of low capacity and trust, that's the portion of the trust. It's a trust from the state that's kind of been denied, right? It's been cut off and screwed up. The city over and over again has violated the trust of thousands of people every single day for 365 days. They steal their stuff, they do whatever. This may not concern you with the property that's being discussed, but that's what everybody else has to worry about. Over and over again, between the state and the city, on many different levels, trust has been violated. We have a city that, as you heard many times, and I won't go over it for, and waste your time, they've passed bills forcing upon a plan to take some property. But this property has several problems. First off, we got to remember that it was dredged. They changed the harbor. Who allowed that change? It was before the EPA. It was before anybody was actually doing what you guys are doing now. So we really don't have a true study besides what military wants to say about it. We do know that the density level of that island is much denser than anywhere else on this island. Why? Because it was ground up. It's made out of coral. It's made out of dirt and everything else, and not lava itself, where it's porous. The filtration system doesn't happen the same as what it does naturally. We do know of a couple other incidences where there was a form of contamination that happened. We don't know if that is filtered off, killing more things in the ocean, or if it's poisoning anything around it. But what we do know is that they happened. We hear a lot of talk of due diligence around here, but first off, we need to be confident that you guys will do your due diligence and not just giving out the permit for someone to grab a hold of it and trust someone that on many more levels with just the locals here in general, no matter what culture, heritage, or race, or whatever, has repeatedly beaten upon their people physically and mentally, stole their items, and severely put them for decades into this situation that we now call a problem. It's not a problem. It's a situation that was caused by this government's interaction with its people. So when we go to this land, we want to know that you're actually going to look out for the people and do your due diligence to make sure that that property is even viable to be given to someone in that type of manner. It shouldn't be left up to the city to check. You should already know the paperwork on it. For you to make a real decision, if this is something that you guys would be interested in doing, you need to know that you have the people that you're trying to represent back, that it's okay to even do it. If that stuff is still there and didn't filter off, it's going to leach through. And then to sit there and put asphalt on top of it, we know it's going to raise the temperature of the area. I mean, we see that in Waianae. The military comes in, they cut off the water, they divert it everywhere else, and now we got a desert. And something that used to be on most of the island a tropical rainforest. But we don't call it that anymore. No one calls it that, because it's not. Not here. We've constantly changed the way this island is. I am tying it to it, and if you don't want to follow through, that's not my problem. That's maybe something that you should, just let me listen.
Let's be respectful to each other.
Well, I'm trying to.
I'm trying to help you, and if you're, if you're belligerent.
I'm not being belligerent yet.
Well,
I'm trying not to be.
And I'm not either. So let's try to keep it cool down, get your message across, and if it's a good message, we're going to consider it.
Well, like I'm trying to say, is we know for a fact that this government has changed this land, this island specifically, over and over again. It has changed it in a manner that has been detrimental to our environment and to the people here. And one of those areas is at Sand Island. That Sand Island was used for many other situations for other cultures, to hold them prisoners, to control them in one way or another. And when a culture that has more right to anything decides to use it and gets kicked out of it, and today, now we're talking about opening it back up, but here all this other damage has happened to that area. I would like to know if you guys are willing to do your due diligence before you actually make a decision and say, let's do a study and make sure that this is actually viable to even do before we could potentially create more harm on the people that's around here. Putting asphalt there, having someone sleep on asphalt is a big difference to sleeping on sidewalks. Most of these individuals slept on grass, but they were kicked out of it. Now they're kicked out of the sidewalks. Now you're putting them on a parking lot with tents. The city and county, I've asked twice now, and just the other night, really got into it about where this money is going. And that's where the trust portion that I was talking about also comes in. And I won't go in long to that because it doesn't pertain to this, but just to give you a mindset of where some of us are looking at. It was a $500,000 project. It became $3 million. Then they released saying it's $6 million. It's $6 million for 100 people. It's only for 100 people. We have 9,500 people that's homeless on this island. A select 100 is going to cost $6 million to provide them a tent on a parking lot. Does that make sense? No. So when I ask the question of how much is this costing? Well, it's $25,000 per person. That becomes $2.5 million. We'll just give them another $500,000 because that's what the original project was, and said they just want to spend whatever for it. We still have $3 million missing. The city and county was told that it was $16.9 million that they need for their Housing First project. But they were given $47 million to these people.
That's not going to happen.
I'm getting right to it. Just give me a second and I'll be done with this, okay? When they were given $47 million, plus they're giving another $5.5 million more than what the projects were actually asked for, now we have to understand, where is this money coming from? Well, it comes from the federal government, and as we know, we can't use city services with federal money, back and forth, correct? So this program sits because there's no operational cost for it. Nobody's wanting to provide the money to operate this program. So as we spend $6 million with the property that I'm pretty sure nobody has actually assessed yet, if it's viable enough, if it's good enough to treat other people to live there. And just because you say certain individuals may be on that type of scenario, you as our government or body should not allow something like that if you know it's not right. Okay? So when we know that that much money is being spent and they don't have an answer for it, and we know it's for a project that doesn't have an end date because it's not able to start yet, and there's no plans to start it yet besides continuing to talk. We know when it's a bill that's caused this situation to fall in your laps right now. We know when it's an island that needs an environmental impact report and to be tested to find out if this is legitimate. I would like to know that I could trust that you guys will say no to this until those questions could be answered, especially what pertains to the island and the safety of our people that's on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side?
Thank you, Chairman Ayala. My name is Greg Moores, and I'm not here for this today. I'm here for a project which I'm probably postponing right now, but I think I've got a different perspective that I'd like to share. 20 years ago, I built a transitional housing project, or was part of a group that built transitional housing on the Big Island. And I can tell you, if you're looking for the perfect project, you'll never find it. If you're looking for an area where all the neighbors are going to endorse it, you'll never find it. If you're looking for a solution that solves every issue to homelessness, you'll never find it. The only solution that I see is 1,000 solutions. This is for 100 people. It's not the right project for everybody, but if you can get 100 people off the streets, that's 100 people that aren't sleeping on a sidewalk or in a park or in a car. And if people don't like it, they won't go. Right? We were able to do this because we did not use government money, we did not use government land, and we did not use government service providers. And the transitional housing at Kauai High was there for almost 20 years. And we served hundreds and hundreds of families and individuals who otherwise would have been sleeping on a park. I would support the application of the city and county to use it. It may not be perfect, there may be problems, but for every time that you do a project like this, you're going to learn something new, and the next project will be a little bit better. This is not a prison. You're not forcing people to go there, so if they're not happy, if they don't like the area, if they don't like the lifestyle, if they don't like the guard shack, they don't have to go. I'm not here to support what the city and county may or may not be doing, but I just wanted to share my experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Question? Good question?
The Kauai High project was pretty good.
Yeah, it was. I recall when we built that project, I was doing a presentation to a chamber group, and one of the guys in the back was laughing because basically what we built were plywood tents. Yeah. They were 8 feet by 16 feet, and they each had a toilet, a shower, and they each had a microwave. And we built them for under $20,000 a unit. And one of the guys said, "Oh, they look like chicken coops," and they started laughing. And our service provider was Catholic Charities. And Carol Ignacio, a wonderful woman, stepped and said, she said, "Let me tell you a story." She goes, I'll tell you about one of our clients. Her name is Mary. Not a real name, but we'll just call her Mary. For the last 8 months, Mary has been sleeping at Spencer Park with her children. And for the last 8 months, Mary's been raped every night. And she never cried out because she didn't want to scare her children. And if you can pick up 100 people like that and put them someplace safe, then I say do it. Thank you.
That's great. Continuing on this side.
Good morning. I'm almost noon.
Yes.
I'll be brief. I'm Alexander Shore. I go by Sandy. I'm an associate dean at the University of Hawaii. We're the next door neighbors to the facility that is being proposed here. We were before your board in January to get a right of entry for building out the facility around the METC facility. Erica Lacroix, who's the chancellor at Honolulu Community College, is possibly outside, but certainly is involved in this, as is the Hawaii Athletics Department, who have 150 students who do sailing down there 4 days a week. It's a well-used facility at the METC already, and we expect to be putting in additional facilities there, not not for people working there, but for storage and for use, access to the water. We are not actually opposed to this. We understand that if it is coming in, we need to learn how to work with our new neighbors. We have questions, and in particular, they have to do with security. They have to do with facilities and infrastructure. Very briefly, there was reference 2 nights ago at the public meeting to the police, or sorry, to the security guards stopping every car coming off of Sand Island Access Road coming into either the facility or to the other adjacent facilities. I don't understand the purpose of that. I don't understand how that would be done or what the planning is, whether such planning is in progress. I'd like to get more information on that. It's not something which we would particularly endorse. There is a locked gate which controls the road going back down to the boat launch area and to the METC facility. To my knowledge, it has not been locked for several years. It is no longer closed, but it does have that capacity, and the university does have a key access to that facility, as do others. I don't know anything about the BMX facility or what they're, or any of the other neighbors, whether they've been involved in this. There's been no comment from them at this point, but at least from the university's perspective, that's a concern. The fencing that is to be put up, we're not familiar with what's going up. We also intend to fence the lot between the METC facility and this proposed. There's 3 roughly 5-acre parcels there, the one that's built out now, the middle one, and the one that's being proposed. And we expect to put security fencing around. We understand and see that there are people living under the Keawe trees on the facility that we're going to be building out already, and we don't really know how many. We don't know the impact that this new facility will have or that our impact will have. We are doing an environmental assessment. It's just begun. We have 2 years, as you recall, to prepare to use this site, and we expect to be doing a fairly detailed environmental assessment, archaeological assessment. There was an environmental impact statement done here in 1992 that I assume that many people here have referred to when they're looking at the contamination. It's not detailed information in that, but it's posted on the, it's available for anybody that needs it. Basically, those are the issues that we have is access, security, understanding the relationship of the new facility with the existing people that do live there. There's people that live overnight in the boat launch area. There's people that live under the Keawe trees. How the security, the 2 security guards that have been identified, which is about $250,000 a year if they pay the same rates we do. About $100,000 to $150,000 per guard for 24/7 security. That's a fairly expensive thing to do, and that's not very much security. So that's really all I have. I just wanted to make certain that you understood that we do have our concerns, but we are prepared to be good neighbors, and we'd like to be kept informed.
Any questions for Alexander? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to testify on this matter? Last one before we... Dan?
Good afternoon, Dan Purcell, member of the public. As is often the case, I have concerns about some procedural issues. First, I would say it's unfortunate that Board Member Woodside is not here today since being appointed. There's been 3 meetings. She's been at one of them. It would be nice to have a woman here. I know she's the only woman on the board and the only woman we've had in 4 years. Secondly, just for a bit of information, I think only one of you, Jimmy Gomes, has actually been confirmed by the legislature. So come January, has anyone else been confirmed?
I've been confirmed.
Oh, okay, good. So we have a couple. Good. All right. Well, that's good.
And
Come
so is Tommy Oy.
Tommy Oi's been confirmed also. Excellent. Okay, good. More than I thought. Well, good. I'm glad you'll all be around for a while. My concerns regarding this particular property revolve around safety issues. I know recently here on Oahu we had a gentleman in a wheelchair who was homeless, couldn't hear, and he was hit by a motor vehicle and killed. And I know where that bridge does not have a sidewalk. When you have to, if you need to leave there, you have to go to basically down the street. There was what appears to be a shoulder on the road there somewhat, but there's no sidewalk getting in and out of there. And you may or may not know, there is no free bus service. I know they have this shuttle, but the buses cost $60 a month. And some people who don't have money, they literally cannot ride the bus. So, and that schedule may not fit people getting in and out of there, whatever shuttle they happen to have. And secondly, I'm concerned about the environmental issues. Obviously, some concerns have been raised about the dust and material that might be out there and other things, temperature, heat, and a whole variety of other things. Just as a side item, I think the numbers of homeless that keep being quoted routinely by the media and in all these studies, I think, are grossly understated. I saw on the island of Hawaii, there were many more than I think, and certainly here on Oahu, I see a lot more people out at night sleeping around. That there are way more than these numbers that I see by this. You know, the time and place and time count or whatever it is, it's not very scientific. They kind of just go out and look for some people and count them. It's not like a year-round type assessment of who's out there. So I think we've got a lot more numbers. But you know, I did reserve my right to file a contested case hearing, but I do want to make sure that those procedures are followed correctly. I know for the 30-meter telescope, I requested a contested case hearing, and you have 10 days to file your paperwork for that contested case hearing. 7 days in, posted on your agenda, the published agenda, the staff had already recommended denial of that contested case hearing, and it was still 3 days before you would even receive my paperwork. How staff can recommend denial on a contested case hearing before they've even received the paperwork, I just don't think that's appropriate. So in this case, I hope that now that contested cases have been requested, that you allow the 10 days before staff prepares a recommendation for denial without even seeing the paperwork. Mahalo.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've concluded public testimony at this point.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move into executive session in order to consult our attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities.
We have a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Chris, moved and seconded. We will go into executive session. Did we take a vote? We did not take. Oh, yeah. All those in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Thank you very, very much. So, executive session.
And we're at the brink now where we can stand up in front of the entire world and we can say, shame on you, America. Shame for what you have done to a small group of peace-loving people in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Well, here I go, dropping what I know, taking my audible time, busting a rhyme for the holla-ho. So, listen up, my local bro, as I get my point across. Are we living in a paradise on the brink of being lost to the man? Don't you understand? The same man who stole the blacks from their motherland. So you can take my house, take my car, and try to take my name, but the blood that flows through these veins will always be the same.
There is no compromise when I analyze with my eyes that it isn't enough to criticize the government lies. I just get up, get out, and start fighting. The only way to get what we deserve is by united. Out this cool, but if it's satisfied, so then you must be a fool. Because you got the blood, the power, the mana. Hawaiians, you can be anything that you wanna be. Bound by blood, joined by the race. It's the right time, I'm to shove a bit to your face of America. Cause all she wants is the green. That's the 10 little Indians, they know what we mean. So fight Hawaiians, fight, no matter what the cost. Do you wanna live in paradise?
Or a paradise lost? Same damn thing with our people and our land. I don't think we can deal with this kind of separation. Look at the Japanese, at least they got reparations being thrown in the camp during the Second World War. So won't somebody tell me what the hell I'm fighting for? For my blood, for my land, for my life, for my mama, for my pops, and all the people that is living in this drama. I'm a drop a funky line to the bass and the drum. Never forgetting, ripping and shredding, never forgetting where I'm
another who disregards the land, better known as my brother. And another thing, if you don't have the blood in your veins, you call yourself a white hood, you better think again. So don't get me wrong, I don't wanna be mistaken. This is for the punks out there who are fake and perpetrating, trying to be something that they're not. Every day, every way, always taking what I got. Lying to my people, hoping that we don't deny that you wanna claim my blood and my birthright. Being born on the islands don't make you a Hawaiian. I only speak the truth, got no reason to be lying, but I got a lot of love for the land and the people, cause they all in this together. Everybody keep it equal, no matter what the color, no matter what the race. If you love the land, then you belong in this place.
No matter what you are, just be careful of what you do. Take care of the land, and the land will take care of you. And to the natives out there who don't give a damn, you got no business living on your own land. Be proud of the blood that is flowing in your system. The strongest weapon that a man could have is his wisdom. So fight Hawaiians, fight no matter what the cost. Do you wanna live in paradise or a paradise lost?
Oh, Kamatani.